Just because you've received $200,000 from us doesn't entail any obligation on our part, my eldest son's wife admonished me, despite my footing the bill for their new house. Reflecting back 15 years to when my husband passed away, it was an immensely challenging period to raise children as a single mother. The bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers had triggered waves of recession, making job opportunities scarce, particularly for someone like me who could only manage part-time work at the time. Full-time employment felt like a distant dream. How he persevered through those hardships and pulled myself out of poverty, I managed to purchase a new apartment for my eldest son and his wife. However, instead of gratitude, my eldest son's wife continued to show disrespect. Frustrated and at my wits' end, I turned to my son, asking if he had anything to say while his mother was being treated so poorly. His indifferent response stung. "See what happens when you stop paying." That moment, something inside me snapped. "Well then, I will," I declared, cutting off all payments. And thus, I am Emma, currently 53 years old, a single mother who raised 2 boys on her own. I got married at 20, bore my eldest son Edward at 22, and 3 years later, welcomed my second son George into the world. Life was good with my loving and family-oriented husband, who worked for a small to medium-sized enterprise. Our modest lifestyle reflected our financial situation. We made do with the cheapest groceries, indulging in grilled meat only on payday. Tragedy struck when my husband died in a car accident, leaving us without his income. The savings we had set aside quickly dwindled, and I found myself working tirelessly to make ends meet. Despite my efforts, full-time employment eluded me, and part-time jobs paid meager wages. I refused to resort to work that exploited my sexuality, despite the potential for higher earnings. Desperate to improve our situation, I turned to the computer my late husband had purchased and explored ways to earn money online. Starting a blog titled Single Mom's Child Rearing Struggles, I subtly incorporated affiliate marketing, hoping to supplement our income. To my surprise, the blog gained traction rapidly, attracting attention from online articles and magazines, resulting in a steady stream of income deposited into my account every month. Requests for lectures started pouring in, and before I knew it, I had earned the title of Queen of Affiliate Marketing. Leaving behind my day and night part-time jobs, I made affiliate marketing my primary source of income, hosting lectures and seminars on the side. Suddenly, I found myself living a lifestyle so opulent that it seemed unbelievable compared to the days when I struggled to afford even a school backpack for George. However, as our financial situation improved, cracks began to appear in our family dynamic. Edward, basking in newfound extravagance, neglected his studies and ended up failing a year of high school. Refusing to repeat the grade, he dropped out altogether, immersing himself in the nightlife scene and falling in with a troublesome crowd. Looking back, I realized how foolish I was to get carried away by my newfound success, neglecting my role as a mother. Caught up in the whirlwind of lectures and accolades, I failed to be there for my sons during their crucial adolescent years. Instead, I showered Edward with money whenever he asked, oblivious to the harm it was causing. While Edward spiraled into trouble with the law, George, in stark contrast, remained steadfast in his studies, distancing himself from negativity and injustice. Their paths diverged drastically, straining their relationship. George, witnessing Edward's aimless existence, voiced his concerns, urging me to stop enabling him. Determined to help Edward find purpose, I secured him a job at a publishing company through a connection. Yet despite my efforts, Edward's disregard for responsibilities led to his eventual dismissal, leaving me frustrated and disappointed, especially considering the publisher's support in turning my success stories into books. I found myself apologizing once again, this time for the irresponsibility of my over 20-year-old son. However, to my surprise, they offered their own apologies, admitting that our guidance had been lacking. It was a bitter experience for all involved, leaving no one feeling fulfilled. Feeling unfit to be used by others, I resolved to venture into something on my own. Despite his own lack of perseverance, Edward finally expressed an interest in starting his own business. I invested in his venture, an import business, only to suffer significant losses when he treated it more like a series of sightseeing trips than a serious endeavor. Optimistic due to my extensive network of friends, Edward then turned to network marketing. In support, I purchased pots and water purifiers, hoping for success. Unfortunately, this too ended in failure. Matters worsened when Edward registered George as a member without his consent, damaging their relationship and leading to more apologies from us. Despite these setbacks, Edward met a woman through his network marketing efforts and began discussing marriage and future plans. Hoping it would inspire responsibility, I supported him once more, buying a new condominium for their home. However, their life remained unstable, and they forewent a wedding ceremony. Their next idea was to open a wine bar in New York as a couple, and I provided the startup capital. With Edward now 30 and married, it was clear he couldn't rely on his parents forever. Despite previous failures, we decided to open the bar as a corporation, both holding representative rights. Despite my warnings that this was the final chance, Edward remained indifferent. He boasted about his import connections, but seemed more interested in nightly gatherings with friends than in running a successful business. Despite my efforts to guide him, his behavior left me speechless and disheartened, especially when his wife suggested marketing tactics to keep the bar afloat. As his mother, witnessing Edward's drunken antics, I couldn't help but feel a mix of disbelief and disappointment. His irresponsible words still lingered, but it was his wife's attitude that truly disgusted me. "My family is super wealthy, you know. Though I might not look like it, I'm from a good family. So I can help out if you're in trouble with money," she'd say, holding an empty wine bottle. Her favorite phrase. I had only met her parents once during the marriage introduction, and they didn't exude wealth. Her imposing older brother, Kevin, who seemed to be in charge, made a stronger impression. Edward's odd fondness for his brother-in-law left me uneasy. Months after the shop opened, it was hemorrhaging thousands of dollars monthly, depleting all the startup capital I had provided. Despite my efforts to cover the deficit, Edward and his wife remained unconcerned. Distraught, I turned to my younger son, George, for advice. Though he had been avoiding Edward since the network business incident, he listened kindly and promised to investigate. A week later, I visited the shop again. It was nearing month-end and rent and utility deadlines loomed. The shop should have been bustling, but it was empty except for Edward, his wife, and Kevin's group, all getting drunk. Approaching Edward, I calmly expressed my concerns. But before he could respond, his wife interjected, her speech dripping with entitlement. Her callousness was too much to bear. "You promised to work hard with Edward," I retorted, unable to stay silent. "What is this situation?" I couldn't understand why they spent every day getting drunk with Kevin's friends. Today, I decided to confront them about the situation. I didn't anticipate a satisfactory response from my clearly intoxicated daughter-in-law. Instead, it was my brother-in-law who spoke up. "What are you talking about? If you close the shop, it will only damage your own reputation. After all, you're a joint representative," he asserted, lounging back on the sofa with a domineering air, showing no respect for his elders or relatives. "You're just nouveau rich who doesn't know how to use money. That's why we're spending it for you," he continued, bombarding me with unbelievable words. Overwhelmed by his audacity, I finally became emotional. An exchange of heated words ensued, and I couldn't hold back any longer. "I'm the one who provided the money to open this store and for your apartment. How can you say such terrible things?" I exclaimed, feeling the weight of my husband's absence keenly. Unable to tolerate the insults any longer, I turned to Edward, hoping for support. But he remained silent, even as his mother was being insulted in front of him. "Then try stopping the payments," he retorted callously, his words cutting deep. Something inside me snapped. "I'd be happy to do just that," I declared, leaving the shop with those words ringing in the air. As I exited, I heard her shouting after me, as if to ensure I heard her challenge. Days passed, and at the turn of the month, they summoned me to the store. It seemed they were feeling the pressure from all sides due to the missed payments. Reassuringly, George agreed to accompany me. Arriving at the shop, I found Edward, his wife, and Kevin waiting. Kevin, ever the provocateur, remarked sarcastically about George's presence, insinuating he was my bodyguard. Thankfully, Edward clarified that George was his younger brother, and Kevin seemed to understand, his speech surprisingly clear without the influence of alcohol. However, I noticed something amiss. Edward remained standing while his wife and brother-in-law lounged on the sofa. Kevin wasted no time in addressing the situation, his tone heavy with accusation as he rested his feet on the table. I couldn't contain my anger at his utterly outrageous behavior and snapped back, reminding him that it was none of his business. But George intervened, urging us to continue as it wasn't entirely unrelated. Introducing himself once more, he revealed his profession. I am George, an attorney. I am going to sue Millie and Kevin, who claims to be her brother, for fraud and embezzlement. His calm demeanor left the three of them puzzled. When did you become a lawyer? Edward asked incredulously, as George had still been a high school student during the network business incident that caused a rift between the brothers. Since then, Edward and George hadn't communicated much, leaving Edward in the dark about George's endeavors. Undeterred, George proceeded to lay out the facts. Firstly, Millie, you and Edward are living together in the apartment purchased by our mother, and you're working together in the store financed by her. However, since you haven't submitted a marriage certificate yet, your arrangement is considered a de facto marriage. Ignoring Edward's question, George pressed on. Interrupting, Edward turned to Millie in surprise, questioning whether they had indeed not submitted their marriage certificate. Flustered, Millie settled back onto the sofa, struggling to find her words. Realizing that George had likely uncovered this information beforehand, he smoothly continued. In addition to that, Millie, you have been in an intimate relationship with Kevin for a long time and have been cohabiting with him right before you started living with my brother. Edward's expression shifted from surprise to annoyance. Wait, is it true, bro? He demanded, finally grasping the gravity of the situation. I couldn't help but glare at him as George laid out the damning evidence. And aren't you staying at Kevin's house several times a week even now? This means you are in a state of de facto marriage with him as well. You have deceived Emma and Edward and used them for your money-making. This can be interpreted as a fraud charge, George asserted. My eldest son's wife was thrown into disarray by George's words. She turned to Kevin, sitting next to her, seeking clarification. Wait a minute. What does this mean, Kevin? Didn't you say that it wouldn't be a crime as long as we were just deceiving Edward? Millie admitted, out of sorts with George's accusations, revealing that she had deceived Edward at Kevin's instruction. Her admission left me astounded by her simple-mindedness. George continued to press the issue. Kevin and Millie, both of you faked a relationship with the intention of earning money. Emma would not have bought an apartment if she knew the truth. So you owe her monetary damages, George stated firmly, leaving no room for doubt. Kevin, finally grasping the severity of the situation, radically changed his attitude and began to apologize, even prostrating himself in contrition. But George wasn't finished. Aren't you reselling the expensive wine you bought in this store on your personal website? That's embezzlement, and it's pretty severe, George pointed out, impressing me with his thorough examination of the store's accounts. As Kevin's past offenses came to light, Millie interjected, revealing that they were both currently on probation. George explained that probation sentences are cumulative, meaning previous offenses would add to the current one. Millie realized the gravity of their situation, understanding that they might not be free for more than 20 years. With evidence of embezzlement, fraud, and monetary damages, George made it clear that they needed to be prepared for the consequences. The weight of their actions hung heavy in the air as the reality of their predicament sunk in. I may not fully grasp the legal intricacies, and George's actions might seem harsh, but it's clear these are serious crimes. Finally understanding the gravity of their actions, the two of them bowed before us in silence. So I was a victim of fraud. Thanks, George, you saved me, Edward remarked, acknowledging George's role in uncovering the truth. However, when George announced plans for a civil lawsuit against them, Edward was taken aback, finding the situation too complicated to comprehend. Despite being one of the business associates, George sought damages for the store's losses caused by Kevin's mismanagement and warned Edward of potential criminal charges if he continued to turn a blind eye. As they pleaded for leniency, I realized George had been aware of Millie's actions since the network business incident. His dedication to justice and his meticulous investigative skills, honed while studying law and working at a detective agency, were evident. Despite his firm stance, I couldn't help but marvel at his growth from a bullied child to a capable adult. Ultimately, George chose not to press charges immediately, citing the statute of limitations for fraud cases. He observed their behavior, hoping for genuine reflection and change of heart, and change they did. Millie now works diligently at a nursing home, while Kevin dedicates himself to church duties as a priest apprentice. Even Edward, once a cause for concern, has distanced himself from his past associates and runs the wine bar with integrity. Their transformations give me hope for the future. Perhaps it's time to celebrate their progress with a launch party for the wine bar. And as I reflect on the twists and turns of this journey, I consider writing a book to capture the remarkable story of redemption and growth.
You heard our conversation yesterday, right? My eldest son and his wife are coming back home for the birth of their child. So I need you to move your stuff out to the yard. Excuse me? You can't have kids anyway. You don't help with my son's work, so the least you could do is make some room. But I'm paying $20,000 in rent. This is getting too tiring to deal with. I live with my mother-in-law, but now she wants me out of the house because my brother-in-law and his wife are returning. My mother-in-law, brother-in-law, his wife, and my husband. This house is full of problems. I've been trying to keep things running smoothly, but it's becoming a hassle to think about it all. I'm done thinking. Okay, I'll leave, but I can't just put my belongings in the yard. I'll come back later to pick them up. You're leaving? Thank you, that's a big help, my mother-in-law said, ignoring my pleas. I started packing my things and left the house. 7 seconds after stepping out the door, I took out my phone and called a junk removal service. Once I stopped thinking, no one could stop my actions. I'm Rachel, a 43-year-old IT consultant. My husband, Eric, is also 43 and runs 4 restaurants. We're both 43, and people often assume we've been married a long time and have a kid or 2, but we're actually newlyweds. We both lived as workaholics and didn't marry until this age. I had given up on marriage just before turning 43, but a random visit to a bar after work changed my mind. Is this your first time here? He asked. Yes, that's right. I had been curious about it for a while, but it was hard for me to go in alone because the place is so stylish. But I worked hard today, so I decided to go in as a reward to myself. I was relieved to find a counter where it was easy for a loner to spend time. We have many women who come alone, so feel free to visit anytime. My husband Eric chatted with me with a smile. I sat at the end of the bar. I knew he was just trying to attract a new customer, but for someone like me who had no friends to eat with at this age, even this kind of service felt nice. Feeling comfortable in Eric's restaurant, I started visiting often. I always sat at the end of the bar, and it became normal for Eric to chat with me while I ate. What does an IT consultant do? He asked. I introduce it to companies and do strategic planning. I've worked with restaurants too. Once I suggested a tablet-based ordering system to reduce labor costs and improve efficiency. Oh, the system that's become common? How much does that cost? For a place like this, it would cost about this much, I said, punching numbers into my phone calculator and showing him the screen. No way, that's too much for a small business like mine. Eric shook his head and hands vigorously. Eric was curious and always eager to learn from our conversations. He looked for ways to apply new knowledge to his work. Even though it seemed like just a pleasant conversation, I was slowly drawn to his dedication. Likewise, Eric grew fond of me, seeing that I was hardworking. I'm always busy with work and can't talk much. How about we go out for dinner sometime? Excited about the chance to dine with a restaurateur, I eagerly agreed. I was thrilled to be asked out, but saying something so girlish at nearly 43 would be embarrassing, so let's just leave it at that. My husband didn't just ask me out that one day. He continued to invite me out for meals occasionally. It's natural for adult men and women who frequently dine together to develop a romantic relationship. We started dating, and 3 years later, as we both turned 43, we decided to get married. Feeling shy about being a bride at 43, I asked my husband to skip the wedding ceremony. We just took some photos of us dressed up. After we got married, I moved from my apartment to my husband's house. His house is a 4-story building with a garden and parking, located in a high-end area. The rent is apparently around $2,000. My husband was living there with his mother. Some might think it's unthinkable to live with a mother-in-law right after getting married, but I'm 43, so I didn't mind much. Plus, my mother-in-law is 71, and my father-in-law has passed away, so living together seemed necessary. When my husband suggested living with his mother, I immediately said it was okay. But after starting to live with my mother-in-law, I regretted accepting so quickly. When I moved into my husband's house, besides the bedroom for us, I even got a nice office room for myself. His house seemed too big for just 2 people, with many spare rooms. Once I settled in, I asked my husband, "Why do we need such a big house just for you and your mother?" He replied, "I have a brother 4 years older than me. He left home after college, and we've mostly lost touch. He hasn't been home at all, and it's been a few years since I've heard from him. He's been moving from job to job and place to place. He's the kind of man who might get into trouble and come back to me and Mom. So we decided to rent a bigger house. I think it's a little too big, but now that I'm married and you moved in, I guess it all worked out." While unboxing my books and arranging them on the shelf, my husband talked about his brother Stephen with a smile. It seems Stephen is aimlessly hopping from job to job, but my husband doesn't think badly of him. "Don't talk about that kid. What if he really comes back?" My mother-in-law appeared at the doorway of what would be my office, seemingly checking on us. It appears she doesn't have a good opinion of him, unlike my husband. It's understandable for a mother to be cold towards an eldest son who shirks his responsibilities. However, I'm worried that my husband and my mother-in-law might clash over his brother someday. Also, I'm not too fond of you either, Mom. Come on, we're going to live together now, so stop saying things like that. I'm not saying you should leave. I just need to make things clear from the start, my mother-in-law said as she walked away, her slippers making a padding sound. "I'm sorry, I'll talk to her," my husband said. "It's okay. I got a similar talk when we met for the wedding. I'll build a relationship with your mother as we live together," I replied, taking a book from my husband's paused hands and placing it on the shelf. It seems she doesn't like my age. I'm 43, so it's not impossible to have children, but I guess it's a challenging thought. Also, Eric's elder brother Stephen is not married and has no children, so there's a high chance that my mother-in-law won't get to see her grandchildren. That's why she's disappointed and wishes Eric had married someone younger. To her, Stephen, who doesn't fulfill his role as the eldest son, and I, who can't fulfill my role as a wife in her eyes, are probably the same. I understand her feelings, but I can't change my age. Once the move was finished and our married life began, my mother-in-law's coldness towards me became clear. She ignored me when I spoke and tried to avoid me. It's a bit lonely, but since there's no harassment or physical violence, I guess it's okay for now. I could build a relationship with her over time. My bigger concern is Eric. "Are you okay with your work?" I asked. "No, it's pretty bad. I need to take action soon, but it's tough to arrange the finances," Eric said, sitting at the dining table with his head in his hands. I stopped doing the dishes and sat down in front of him to listen. These are tough times. Prices are soaring, expenses are climbing, and customers are tightening their wallets. There's no end in sight. "If this keeps up, I might have to close another one of our stores," he continued. About a year into our marriage, the situation at Eric's restaurants worsened. One of the 4 stores had already closed, and it seemed another might have to shut down too. Seeing Eric's troubled face made me feel distressed, but my mother-in-law seemed unaffected by these troubles. "You're Eric's wife, but you don't help out at the store. You just do your own job. Can you really say you're fulfilling your role as a wife?" My mother-in-law overheard our conversation and hurled insults at me from her seat on the sofa. I wondered what she was thinking, but she has her own perspective. Eric has been running his own restaurant for nearly 12 years, overcoming various challenges. I believe he'll pull through this time too. You, his wife, shouldn't be making that face. Are you trying to feed into his anxiety and make him fail? What a terrible wife, she shouted again from the living room to the dining room. Her words were filled with spite and venom. I knew she wasn't just trying to fire me up, but she wasn't entirely wrong. I took her words positively and decided to support Eric to the fullest, smiling reassuringly at my anxious husband. A year later, just as she said, Eric managed to turn the situation around and avoided closing the second store. See, I told you. A stupid wife who can't even trust her husband. Don't drag Eric down, she said. As a side effect, my mother-in-law, who had previously ignored me, started lashing out at me without reservation. The relationship with her might seem to have worsened, but since Eric's business is doing well, I'll consider it a break-even situation. I thought things were balancing out, but it turned out worse for me. Eric, having stabilized the business and with a bit more money, seemed to get carried away, and I heard rumors about his affair. What is he thinking? If there's extra money, there are surely better ways to spend it. Also, it's strange how bad situations tend to pile up. Having seen Eric's business revenue drop, I know this all too well, but I never thought it would happen to me. Eric, Stephen called. His girlfriend is pregnant. That's great news. She's a 33-year-old who worked at the same bar as Eric. They asked something. What? You're being so formal all of a sudden. Stephen is a freelancer, and so is his pregnant girlfriend. With a baby on the way, they're struggling. They asked if they could move into this house and if they could work at your restaurant. I was thinking about how to confront Eric about the affair when my mother-in-law came into the living room and started talking to him. The conversation was about Stephen, whom I've never met, and I was completely left out as they continued talking. It was a strange scene. She used to dislike Stephen for not fulfilling his role as the eldest son, yet now she was asking Eric to welcome him. The reason was simple: the grandchild. She had given up hope of seeing a grandchild, but now saw an opportunity and completely changed her stance. She was even planning to offer them a home and jobs. Eric, who never thought badly of Stephen, had rented this big house for such a time, but the situation has changed, and now I'm here. Isn't it odd to have Stephen and his family move in? I looked at Eric in the living room from the dining area. He was looking back at me with a clearly troubled expression. Come on, it's a good thing. Stephen is in trouble, and you, Eric, have the means to help him. Ah, okay, I got it. Eric sighed, unable to say no to his mother. I had hoped he would stand up to her, but it seems it was just wishful thinking. He kept glancing at me, probably worried about my reaction. The worsening relationship with my mother-in-law, Eric's affair, now living with Stephen and his family, the problems just keep piling up. Overwhelmed and not knowing where to start, I decided to abandon thinking for today and just go to sleep. The next day was a holiday, and probably due to extreme mental fatigue. I slept in until late morning. Eric was at work, so it was just my mother-in-law and me at home. Dreading what she might say about my sleeping in, I reluctantly headed to the living room. You sure slept in. Must be nice to have such leisure, she said. Bracing myself for her usual nagging about not fulfilling my duties as a wife, I tensed up, ready for her words. However, what she said was much worse than I expected. You heard Eric and me talking yesterday, right? Stephen and his wife are coming back for a maternity leave visit, so move your stuff out to the yard. Excuse me, was I still groggy from sleep? Did she really mean I should live in the yard, or was she telling me to leave the house? You can't have kids anyway, and you don't help with Eric's work, so you should at least make room for Stephen and his family. We have 2 spare rooms left, so if you leave and your office is free, we can have a bedroom and a nursery for Stephen's family and a storage room for their stuff. Don't you think the room count and usage are just perfect? It seemed she was indeed telling me to leave. A storage room for Steven's family. I'm being kicked out to make room for something that doesn't even seem necessary. Originally, I was allowed to use the office because there were spare rooms. I don't mind losing the office. A bedroom for Eric and me is enough. Steven's family can live here without me leaving. Realizing that my mother-in-law now sees no reason for me to be in this house as a wife, since she can see her grandchild, I thought about the $20,000 I was paying in rent. I'm too tired to deal with all this. I decided to clear my mind and rest. Silent with my mother-in-law, the only sound in the living room was the ticking of the clock. Okay, time to leave. After resting my mind, I decided it was too much trouble to worry about what happens to Eric, my mother-in-law, Steven's family, and their future. I chose to leave the house. Understood, I'll leave. I can't put all my belongings in the yard, so I'll come back later to pick them up. You're leaving? Thank you, that helps, my mother-in-law said, pleased. Ignoring her, I started packing my things and left the house. 7 seconds after stepping out the door, I took out my phone and called a junk removal service. My decision made after stopping my overthinking couldn't be stopped by anyone. Let them all regret this choice later. I left the house. I decided to stay at a hotel for a while. I had called the junk removal service, but they needed some time to prepare. This worked out since I wanted some time too. 3 weeks after leaving, I rented an apartment and started living alone. I haven't heard from Eric since then. He probably thinks I'll come back eventually. The thought of Eric taking the current situation lightly infuriates me. However, today is the day after his restaurant's day off. I expect a call from Eric when he visits the restaurant for lunch prep. Hey, what's going on here? The restaurant is completely empty, just as I thought, Eric called. I could explain over the phone, but it would be more efficient if your mom was there too. I'm heading to the house now. Can you come back? You can't open the restaurant anyway, right? I couldn't help but laugh before hanging up, amused by Eric's reaction. He must be quite shocked. Still chuckling, I started getting ready to leave. When I arrived at the house, my mother-in-law started yelling at me. What on earth is this? The restaurant's fridge, cooking equipment, tables, all the important stuff is gone. You did this, didn't you? Do you think you can get away with this for free? It seems Eric had explained half of the situation. There was an unfamiliar couple in the living room, apparently Steven and his wife. They looked confused and anxious, not fully grasping the situation and my mother-in-law's extreme anger. Why would you do such a thing? The restaurant can't operate now, my mother-in-law screamed. It's my restaurant, so there shouldn't be a problem with me starting the closing process or having the items I bought disposed of by a junk removal service, right? I replied. Huh? Your restaurant? What are you talking about? My mother-in-law asked. Why don't you explain, Eric? You haven't told your mom, have you? You remember that I still have the main restaurant and the second branch, and the second one was in a financial crisis, right? Yes, of course. You worked hard to turn it around, changing the tables, chairs, signboard, the restaurant's atmosphere, bringing in new cooking equipment, expanding the menu, and replacing the fridge and freezer to accommodate the new menu, right? Well, about that, Rachel actually paid for those expenses. What? What do you mean? Hearing Eric's words, my mother-in-law looked perplexed. She seemed to be trying hard to understand, but probably lacked the full information to grasp everything. Eric continued looking uncomfortable, like he was holding back from saying more, but it was clear this was going nowhere. I decided to explain everything. Before turning 43, I was single and working in it consulting. We didn't have a wedding ceremony, nor did we buy a new house after getting married, so I had saved up quite a bit of money. I lent Eric $400,000 to help turn around his struggling second restaurant branch. $400,000, but you can't just hand over such a large amount of money to your spouse, right? That's why I decided to buy the rights to the second branch and become its owner. I left most of the management to Eric, so there wasn't much for me to do as the owner. The only change was that Eric shifted his focus from the main branch to the second one for its recovery. When Eric's restaurant was in crisis, I showed my concern alongside him. It was when my mother-in-law yelled at me for not showing enough trust in my husband that I decided to support Eric to the fullest. My form of support was giving him the money I had saved during my single years. "Eric, is this true?" she asked. "Yeah, it's true." She said it was okay if I failed and wasted the $400,000. She gave me the money, but since it was such a large amount, if it was going to fail anyway, she suggested becoming the owner. The plan was to pay back the borrowed $400,000 from the restaurant's earnings, but it was simpler for Rachel to become the owner and have the restaurant's income go directly to her. It also meant that she could decide whether to close the restaurant or not. "It's a lie. Can something like that really happen?" my mother-in-law exclaimed. I understand it's hard to believe hearing this all of a sudden. That's why I brought some evidence. I spread documents like the business license, transfer of rights agreement, and lease agreement on the table, proving that I was the owner of the restaurant. My mother-in-law's face turned red as she confirmed my name on those documents. "Why didn't you say anything about this? You always talked about how you believed in Eric and how the restaurant was recovering, right? Even before we got married, you always encouraged Eric like that. He felt pressured by your words, but tried to live up to your expectations, not wanting to disappoint you as the head of the household. You're pretty cold to people like me and Steven who don't fulfill their roles, right? That's why Eric couldn't tell you he borrowed a large sum of money from me. He could have just told me," she protested. "That's why Eric couldn't speak his mind, because she gets upset easily. People like my mother-in-law often don't realize they're putting pressure on others. They might think it's just a small thing to say, but for the one under pressure, it's a huge burden, not something they can easily talk about. And even if they did speak up, she would likely be disappointed and start complaining. It was essential not to let Eric's spirit break under her constant jabs, especially when the restaurant was finally turning around. That's why I kept quiet too. But I really wished she had refused when Steven and his family were coming back. Probably Eric thought it was work-related and agreed without thinking much. Mom, Rachel, I'm sorry. This situation is my fault for not being decisive enough. If I had managed the restaurant well from the start, Rachel wouldn't have had to lend her money. And if I wasn't so weak, I could have told you the truth. If Rachel decides to close the restaurant, then that's it. But what about the part-time workers? My mother-in-law asked. Don't worry. In the past 3 weeks, I've already informed everyone about closing the restaurant, and they all understood. For those interested, I've arranged part-time work at other restaurants through my IT consulting contacts. That's a relief. That was my only concern. So everyone was in on this. Rachel showing me an empty restaurant as a surprise, and everyone keeping the closure from me? Eric, I'm sorry too. I've been pressuring you. And Rachel, I'm sorry for everything up to now. I won't tell you to leave again. My mother-in-law apologized, and it seemed as if everything was resolving nicely. But that's a misunderstanding. I'm far from being satisfied, and the discussion is far from over. Let's settle this matter next. What's this? A divorce papers. When I place the divorce papers on the table, Eric picks them up in shock. What does this mean? Why a divorce? This is supposed to be a reconciliation, right? Don't just assume we've reconciled. You might think it's a secret, but I know about your affair with the part-timer. All the part-time workers knew about it too. That's just a rumor. You can't say things like that without proof. I displayed an image on my smartphone that a part-time worker had sent me and placed it on the table amidst the scattered documents. This is a photo of you entering a hotel. It was taken by one of the part-timers. If you leave the restaurant together and walk towards the nearby hotel district, anyone can take such evidence, not just the police or detectives. Did getting the second branch back on track give you too much confidence? You really got carried away as the owner of the restaurant. I couldn't do much in the day-to-day operations, but I still visited the restaurant from time to time. That's when the part-time workers told me about Eric's affair and asked for my help. When I promised to handle it, they provided incredible support. They sent me proof and even kept the closure of the restaurant a secret from him. Wait a minute, closing the second branch in a divorce? What's going to happen to the rent for this place? Eric asked. The rent for this place? What do you mean? My mother-in-law asked. I haven't mentioned that yet. I've been paying the entire rent of $20,000 a month for this house, I said. Is that also true? She asked Eric. It's true. When the restaurant's revenue started falling, Rachel started paying half of it. But as revenue continued to drop, the amount she had to cover increased. Eventually, she ended up paying it all. $20,000 a month is the same as my salary, so I paid all the rent, and Eric covered other living expenses like food and utilities. So if Eric gets divorced and only has the main restaurant left, obviously living here won't be an option anymore. Eric and my mother-in-law seemed deflated after hearing my words. They slumped as if they had exhausted themselves in a boxing match. Stephen and his wife, now somewhat understanding the situation, hesitantly joined the conversation. What does that mean? We came back here and can't live here? Stephen asked. Wait, Stephen, this is different from what we heard. We thought everything would be fine once we got back home, his wife said. Sorry, Stephen. Right now, I don't have the means to help you with a restaurant or a house. Come on, do something. We're having a baby. At least give me a job. We have enough part-timers. In fact, we need to cut down on staff costs. Eric will work hard, so just wait a bit longer. That's what I'm talking about. Stop saying things like that. Hey, what about my house and job now? Stephen shouted. Eric, my mother-in-law, and Stephen started arguing about their future lives. Stephen's wife, whose name I still didn't know, looked uncomfortably out of place. I had delivered the news about the restaurant's closure and the divorce, so my business here was done. I was tired of constantly trying to smooth things over with Eric and his family, and I refused to live with Stephen and his wife. I didn't care what happened to this house next. They could discuss it amongst themselves. I left the house amidst their shouting. After that, having evidence of the affair, I was able to divorce Eric smoothly. I could have demanded alimony for the affair, but I had a job and didn't need the money. I wanted as little to do with my ex-husband and his family as possible, so I didn't ask for any compensation after our divorce. My ex-husband, Eric, couldn't afford the rent and had to leave the house with his whole family. Financially and emotionally strained, Eric, who had been taking care of his mother, argued that it was actually Stephen's responsibility as the eldest son. But Stephen, who came back without any money, couldn't take care of her. This led to an ugly fight between the brothers about who should take care of their mother. In the end, with no income, Eric had to take her in, but this fight ruined the relationship between the brothers. As a result, Stephen and his wife disappeared again, cutting off all contact. Witnessing the brothers' dispute over her, the mother-child relationship also deteriorated. Now, Eric and his mother are living together reluctantly in a smaller apartment. It's not as spacious as the previous house, and they have to see each other all the time, but they hardly talk, creating an awkward atmosphere in the house. My actions, prompted by thinking ahead, resulted in the breakdown of a family relationship. After the divorce, I first dealt with closing down the restaurant. It was a bit of a hassle, but as the owner, it was my responsibility. However, the fridge, cooking equipment, tables, and chairs I had removed were fairly new, so I managed to sell them at a good price. Adding just a little more money allowed me to finish the restaurant's closure. Though it was a brief period, being a restaurant owner and handling its closure was an experience. I believe these experiences will be useful in my IT consulting work someday. I guess work suits me better than marriage. Convinced of this, I continue to work hard today.
I've decided to give the luxury car you bought to my parents. What are you saying? Mom and Dad are really excited. Wait a second. Did you buy the car just to give it to your parents? Yes, that's right. No matter what you say, the car is already theirs. If you don't agree, I'll divorce you. Divorce? At that moment, something inside me broke. I had always held back, but hearing him say that was too much.
Fine, I said.
If that's how you feel, then I'll do it. My name is Barbara. I'm 40 years old and work in an office. I live with my husband, Anthony, and our 9-year-old daughter, Ashley. Anthony and I both have stable jobs, so we live comfortably. Ashley is growing up well, and I try to stay happy in my own way. But not everything is perfect. My biggest complaint is about Anthony and how he treats his parents. Don't get me wrong, I think it's wonderful that he cares for his mom and dad. But sometimes, it feels like he cares about them more than he does about me and Ashley. This has been a problem for years. One of the worst moments was when I went into labor with Ashley. I called Anthony at work and told him I was having contractions. I asked him to come to the hospital because our baby was about to be born. But Anthony said, "Sorry, I can't. My mom burned her finger, and I'm going to their house to help her." I couldn't believe it. How could he think his mom's burn was more important than being there for the birth of his child? It turned out that his mom had touched a hot pen by accident. The burn was small, and all she had to do was cool it under running water. She was fine, but Anthony rushed over like it was a life-or-death emergency. It wasn't just his mother I was upset with, it was Anthony, too. Why couldn't he see how important that moment was? Another time, when Ashley was turning 1, we planned a special celebration for her birthday. But my in-laws had scheduled a trip and asked Anthony to drive them to their destination. Anthony didn't just take them there. He stayed overnight at the hotel with them because they could book an extra room. Meanwhile, I was at home with Ashley, celebrating her first birthday alone. I couldn't believe he chose a trip with his parents over our daughter's milestone. Anthony is a hardworking man, and he's usually kind to me. But when it comes to his parents, he always puts them first. I've tried to understand, but it hurts when Ashley and I feel like we're not his priority. And now, with the car situation, I'm wondering how much longer I can live like this. I started feeling distrustful towards Anthony after everything that happened. This wasn't just a one-time issue. It kept happening again and again. But even though I was hurt, I couldn't bring myself to divorce him. I still loved Anthony, and I didn't want to take away my daughter's father just like that. Anthony wasn't completely uncaring about our daughter, Ashley. He showed that he loved her in his own way, so I held on to the hope that one day he would put her first. But since Ashley was born, Anthony has never celebrated her birthday with us. She's now 9 years old, and it's always the same. He seems to think that celebrating her birthday is something I should do by myself. I've tried my best to make sure Ashley doesn't feel lonely on her special day. One year, I even thought about inviting Anthony's parents to celebrate with us. When I asked them, they said, "It's too much trouble to come over." I was shocked. Sure, their house is about 3 hours away by car, but Anthony never thinks twice about driving that distance to visit them. Yet for them, it was suddenly a hassle to visit us for their own granddaughter's birthday. It felt selfish to me, but that wasn't even the worst of it. My mother-in-law is difficult in many ways. From the moment Ashley was born, she made it clear she wanted us to have a boy. She even said, "I told you I wanted a boy.
Why didn't you listen to me?"
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Who says things like that? It's not like you can choose the gender of your baby. And honestly, why does it even matter? Anthony's family isn't some noble, traditional family where a son is necessary to carry on the name. My mother-in-law is just old-fashioned and stuck in her ways. She even shows less love toward Ashley because she's a girl. It breaks my heart to see her treat our daughter this way. Anthony, on the other hand, always tries to please his mother. I think that's one of the reasons he doesn't celebrate Ashley's birthday with us. He doesn't want to upset his mom by making her feel like we're prioritizing our family over hers. There have been other hurtful moments, too. One year, Anthony took me to his parents' house for their New Year's family gathering. My mother-in-law used that time to pick on me constantly. She'd say things like, "Barbara, why can't you move faster? Look, that person has an empty glass. Why don't you pour them a drink?" She treated me more like a servant than a daughter-in-law. It felt like she enjoyed bullying me. These moments piled up over the years, and it became harder and harder to ignore how much Anthony's loyalty to his mother was hurting our family. I was working in a brothel. She made fun of me in front of everyone, especially the relatives. She'd say things like, "My son is amazing, but his wife is a disaster. All she does is sit in an office and enter data. How does she not get bored doing such a meaningless job?" I couldn't believe her words. I've explained to her so many times that my job is not data entry. I'm an engineer. But she either doesn't understand or just refuses to listen. And even if I was doing data entry, why does she have to look down on it? That's a perfectly respectable job, too. It's not just me she ignores. She does the same to our daughter. For example, every New Year, she gives gifts to other relatives' children but skips our daughter entirely. It hurts me to see her treated like she doesn't matter. And what's worse is that Anthony never stands up for us. Whenever his mother insults me or our daughter, Anthony just sits there laughing along, pretending it's no big deal. Sometimes he even adds to the criticism, jokingly saying, "Yeah, my wife isn't great without me." It feels like he's trying to impress his family by putting me down. I stayed patient for a long time because I didn't want to take Ashley away from her father. But as the years went by, my love for Anthony slowly started to fade. It's hard to love someone who doesn't protect you or your child from unfair treatment. Then one day, Anthony came to me with a request. "Hey, there's something I've been thinking about buying," he said. "What is it?" I asked. "A car? A cars?" I was shocked. Anthony had never shown any real interest in cars before. Why all of a sudden? "Well, I've been driving to my parents' house a lot lately, and I thought it would be nice to get a new one," he explained casually. "We live close to a supermarket, and I don't drive much. I'm not very interested in cars, so I figured if he wanted one, he could handle it." "Well, it's up to you," I told him. "You're the one who drives it the most." Anthony looked happy with my response, but then his tone changed, and he looked a little guilty. "Actually, here's the thing," he said. "I'll choose the car, and I want you to pay for it." I was stunned. Anthony wanted a car but couldn't afford it himself. He expected me to pay for it. The truth is, my salary has always been the main support for our family. When I was on maternity leave, Anthony didn't contribute his income to the household. I had to return to work right after giving birth, just to make ends meet. I'm an engineer, and I've worked hard for my career, yet Anthony keeps taking my efforts for granted. This car request felt like the final straw. I talked to my company and arranged to work remotely from home, so I could balance my job with raising our daughter. While managing work and parenting, I sometimes found it frustrating that Anthony used his salary only for himself and expected me to pay for big things, like the new car he wanted. Still, I decided to let him buy it. After all, when Anthony is in a good mood, he takes good care of our daughter. "Okay, are you sure?" I asked.
"Yes."
"Thank you," Anthony replied, thrilled. He immediately started looking through car catalogs and doing research online. Since I was the one paying, I tried to warm up to the idea. "Since it'll just be the three of us, we don't need a big car," I told him. Yeah, I know," he mumbled distractedly, not really paying attention. Anthony was more focused on visiting car dealerships and talking to dealers. After about 3 weeks, he told me he had found the perfect car and wanted to take me to the dealership. Anthony was so excited when we arrived at the store. I sat down, waiting for him to tell me what to do next. Soon, the dealer brought out the car. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was a large, luxury minivan. Oh my gosh, are we really buying this? I asked, shocked.
Yeah.
Isn't it great? I'm so excited, Anthony said with a big smile. Wait a minute, I said, trying to stay calm. We don't need something this big. It's way too much for just the three of us. Anthony brushed off my concern. Think about the future. It's better to have something sleek and roomy, just in case we have another baby, he insisted. I was stunned. Even if we did have another child, this car was far too big for a family of 4. Are we seriously buying this car? I asked again, hoping he'd reconsider. Anthony frowned, clearly frustrated. Why do you keep saying the same thing over and over? You're making the dealer uncomfortable. You're the one who said to leave it to me. I did, I admitted, but this is not what I had in mind. Anthony ignored me, signed the contract, and finalized the purchase. Then the dealer explained the price. My heart sank. It was way more expensive than I expected. I can't pay for this all at once, I said. We'll have to take out a loan. Anthony insisted the car loan be in his name, so we went ahead with it. From that point on, we were tied to monthly loan payments for a car I didn't even want. I couldn't shake the feeling that Anthony cared more about impressing himself than making practical choices for our family. I would deposit the money into Anthony's account every month to cover the car loan payments. That's how we managed to buy the car. Eventually, the car arrived at our house.
Wow.
It's so cool, Anthony said, grinning ear to ear as he admired it. I thought to myself, well, if he's this happy, maybe it's worth it. But I had no idea what was coming next. One weekend, Anthony grabbed the car keys, so I asked, "Are you going somewhere?" "Oh yeah. I'm heading to my mom and dad's," he said casually. "Wait, what? You're leaving Ashley behind to visit your parents again? And you're taking the new car?" I asked, already frustrated. Anthony then said something that completely shocked me. "Yep, that's right. I've decided to give the luxury car you bought to my parents as a gift." I froze. "What are you talking about?" "Mom and Dad are thrilled about it. Of course, I'll still drive it when we go out, but it's theirs now," he said happily. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Hold on a minute. Are you saying you bought this car just to give it to your parents?" "Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying," Anthony admitted. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, my voice rising. "You told me you wanted the car, so I agreed to buy it. If I had known it was for your parents, I would have never allowed it." Anthony shrugged. "It doesn't matter. It's already bought, it's in my name, and I can do whatever I want with it. If you disobey me, I'll divorce you." "Divorce?" I repeated, stunned. At that moment, something inside me snapped. For years, I had been holding back, trying to keep the peace for our daughter's sake. Even though Anthony always put his parents first, I believed he cared about our family too. But now, I realized he was willing to throw us aside without hesitation if it meant pleasing his parents. "Divorce, huh? If I disobey, you'll just leave?" I said, my voice trembling with anger. "Who do you think you are?" Anthony didn't respond, so I continued.
"Fine.
Let's get a divorce. I don't want you around anymore. Go back to your mom and dad, mama's boy."
What?"
Anthony said, clearly caught off guard. "I've had enough, Anthony. I'm tired of being second to your parents. I'm tired of you disrespecting me and ignoring our daughter. If you care so much about them, go live with them. I'm done." For the first time, I felt a sense of freedom. I had been patient for too long, but this was the last straw. If Anthony wanted to prioritize his parents over his family, then he could go back to them. Ashley and I deserved better. I decided to provoke Anthony, and just as I expected, his face turned red with anger. "You're mocking me, aren't you?" he snapped. "Fine then. Let's get a divorce right now." Anthony stormed off, sneering as he said, "I'll go get the divorce papers." He left for the city office, slamming the door behind him. While he was gone, I began packing my things. I called my parents, explained the situation, and asked them to come pick me and my daughter up. I told Ashley to pack her belongings as well. Soon after, Anthony returned, holding the divorce papers in his hand. "Here they are. Sign them, he demanded. His handwriting on the forms was bold and messy, showing how angry he was when he filled them out. Without hesitation, I signed my part. Well, here you go. I'll file it. Why don't you just leave now? Anthony said coldly. I'm going, don't worry. I don't need you to tell me, I replied. You're such a terrible wife, you know that? Anthony muttered, stomping around the house loudly. As I watched him, I wondered, why did I stay married to someone like this for so long? I regretted not leaving him earlier. But there was no point dwelling on the past. What mattered was that I was finally leaving. For the first time in years, I felt grateful to be taking this step. From now on, I'd focus on being the best mother I could be for Ashley. 10 minutes later, my parents arrived. Together, we packed up the last of my things and loaded them into their car. With everything ready, we left. After reaching my parents' house, I went to the city office to file the divorce papers. Once it was finalized, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. It was just a piece of paper, but knowing that Anthony and I were no longer married made me feel free and lighter. I decided to start looking for a new place where Ashley and I could live together. I was determined to create a better future for us. About a week later, while I was staying at my parents' house, something unexpected happened. I saw the luxury car Anthony had purchased parked outside. Curious and slightly irritated, I walked inside with Ashley. There, in the living room, were my ex-husband Anthony and my ex-in-laws, sitting together. My mother noticed me right away and quickly took Ashley to another room, giving me some space to deal with whatever was about to unfold. I stood there silently, watching them. My emotions were a mix of anger, disbelief, and a strange sense of closure. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it. My focus was now on building a better life for me and my daughter, away from the chaos of the past. I walked into the living room, and Anthony immediately started talking to me in a panic. Barbara, what's going on with the insurance for the car? He asked, sounding agitated. I looked at him coldly. What's the matter with you? Why are you barging into my parents' house like this? I replied firmly. At that moment, my ex-in-laws raised their voices angrily. We didn't want to come here either. We came because we had no other choice. Why are we being yelled at? They shouted defensively. My father, who had been quiet until then, spoke calmly but sternly. If that's the case, then leave. You're strangers to us now. If you don't go, we'll call the police to have you removed. Hearing this, my ex-in-laws became silent, clearly frightened by the suggestion. Meanwhile, Anthony, still looking panicked, turned to me again. Barbara, seriously, what's happening with the insurance payments for the car? He asked again, almost pleading. I let out a deep sigh. Did you forget what you said when you signed the contract? Asked, looking straight at him. You insisted that everything be in your name, the car, the loan, and all the paperwork. You said it was your car. So, you're the one responsible for paying the insurance. My words seemed to hit Anthony and his parents hard. Their faces turned pale as they realized the situation. Anthony had insisted on taking out the loan in his name, all because of his pride. He had wanted to show off by being the one to own the luxury car. Well, I continued, I didn't want that car in the first place. So, it's only fair that you're the one who has to deal with the payments. Anthony and his parents looked defeated, but then Anthony muttered something that made the situation even clearer. Oh no, he said quietly. I raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to explain. We had a little accident with the car. An accident? Asked, crossing my arms. Anthony hesitated but finally admitted, we were so excited about the new car that we drove it too fast. We ended up hitting another car on the road. The front of the car is completely wrecked. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So that's why it was parked the way it was when I got here, I said, piecing it together. You parked it so I wouldn't see the front, didn't you? Anthony didn't respond. He just looked down, ashamed. His parents stayed quiet too, clearly embarrassed by what had happened. I stood there, feeling a mix of anger and relief. This whole mess was a reminder of why I'd made the right choice to leave Anthony. Whatever happened with that car and its payments was no longer my problem. It was Anthony's mess to clean up now, not mine. I didn't look at the car closely at first, but Anthony and his parents came to me about the insurance because they knew I had been in charge of payments. However, since the car was technically owned by the loan company, they were responsible for getting it repaired. And because they didn't have insurance, they now had to pay for all the repair costs themselves, plus the cost of fixing the guardrail they damaged. I couldn't help but wonder how expensive it would be to repair a luxury car. I was sure the bill would be huge. In the end, Anthony and his parents had no choice but to return the car. They were charged a massive amount of money for the repairs, leaving them in serious financial trouble. Not long after, I started receiving emails from Anthony. He kept begging me to get back together with him. In one message, he said they couldn't afford to pay their rent or utility bills anymore. Anthony had to move back in with his parents because of their money problems. However, things didn't go well for him there either. His parents, angry about the car and the financial mess, were very hard on him. Anthony couldn't handle their attitude and didn't want to stay at home, but he couldn't live on his own either because he had so much debt. Despite all this, Anthony kept insisting that he wanted to see our daughter, Ashley. I thought it was incredibly selfish of him to demand that now, after everything he had done. I decided I wouldn't allow it. I ignored all his emails and didn't tell him anything about the new house where Ashley and I had moved. At first, I was worried about how Ashley would feel. I wondered if she would miss her father, but to my surprise, she didn't seem to mind at all. Instead, she seemed happy and was enjoying her new life. Seeing her smile gave me strength. I made a promise to myself. I would keep working hard to give my daughter a good and stable life. I couldn't understand how Anthony could prioritize his parents over his own child. And asking me to pay for a car only to give it as a gift to his parents? That was something I could never forgive. In the end, Anthony ruined his own life. He made selfish choices, and now he's paying the price. I don't feel sorry for him. He brought it all on himself. As for me and Ashley, we're moving forward. I hope that from now on, we can live a happy life together. Ashley deserves a bright future, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure she gets it. My name is Cheryl Whitman, and I've spent my entire life being invisible.
Tonight was supposed to change that.
I stood alone in the corner of the gallery, my fingers wrapped tightly around a glass of cheap champagne. The white walls were adorned with my restored paintings, each one a testament to countless hours of painstaking work. But the room was nearly empty, save for a few wandering art enthusiasts who barely glanced my way. My phone buzzed. Another notification. I unlocked the screen to see my family's group chat exploding with congratulations and heart emojis. For a split second, my heart leapt. Had they remembered?
But no.
It was another post about Jasper's latest touchdown. I scrolled through the messages, my stomach sinking with each one. Way to go, champ. Dad wrote. That's our boy. Mom chimed in. Even Felix, Jasper's twin, had posted a video of himself cheering from the stands. I took a long swig of champagne, wincing at its bitterness. Of course they'd forgotten. Why would tonight be any different? Excuse me, a voice said, startling me from my thoughts. Are you the artist? I turned to see an elderly woman peering at me through thick glasses. Oh, not exactly. I'm the restorer. I bring old paintings back to life. Fascinating, she said, her eyes lighting up. It must take incredible skill. I smiled, warmth spreading through my chest. It does. Each piece is like a puzzle, figuring out the original artist's technique, matching colors perfectly. Cheryl? My phone lit up with an incoming video call. Mom's face appeared on the screen, Jasper's arm slung around her shoulder. Oh, good, you picked up. We wanted to share the moment with you. Jasper just scored the winning touchdown. I forced a smile. That's great, Mom. Congratulations, Jasper. Thanks, sis. Jasper's grin was wide and carefree. Wish you could have been here. I bit back a retort. Of course, I couldn't be there. I was at my own event, the one I told them about weeks ago. So, what are you up to tonight? Mom asked, her tone casual. The elderly woman was still standing nearby, listening curiously. I took a deep breath. Actually, Mom, I'm at my art exhibit. The one I've been working on for months. Remember? There was a pause. Mom's smile faltered for just a moment.
Oh,
Right, of course. That's tonight. Yes, Mom. Tonight. Well, that's wonderful, dear, she said, her voice overly bright. I'm sure it's lovely. We'll have to stop by next time. Next time? I echoed, my voice hollow. Anyway, we should go. There's a celebration dinner for Jasper. Love you. The call ended abruptly. I stared at the blank screen, fighting back tears. Family can be difficult, the elderly woman said softly. I let out a bitter laugh. You have no idea. She patted my arm gently. Don't let their blindness dim your light, dear. Your work is extraordinary. As she walked away, I downed the rest of my champagne. The bubbles burned my throat, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. I looked around the gallery, at the fruits of my labor that my own family couldn't be bothered to see. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I was done being the forgotten daughter, the invisible sister. If they couldn't see me, I'd make damn sure they felt my absence. I pulled out my phone and opened the family chat. My thumbs hovered over the keys for just a moment before I typed. Congratulations, Jasper. Hope you all enjoy the celebration.
don't worry about me.
I won't be around to disappoint you anymore. With a deep breath, I hit send and then blocked every number. It was time to write my own story, one where I was finally the main character. The next morning, I woke with a pounding headache and a hollow feeling in my chest. My phone lay silent on the nightstand, a stark reminder of my impulsive decision. Part of me wanted to take it all back, to apologize and pretend everything was fine. But I knew I couldn't. Not this time. I dragged myself out of bed and headed to the museum, hoping work would provide a much-needed distraction. The quiet halls and familiar scent of oil paints welcomed me like an old friend. I lost myself in the delicate work of restoring a faded landscape, carefully bringing each brushstroke back to life. Excuse me, a voice interrupted my concentration. I was told I could find Cheryl Whitman here. I looked up to see a man with tousled dark hair and warm brown eyes. He held a guitar case in one hand and a crumpled flyer in the other. That's me, I said, setting down my brush. Can I help you? He grinned, extending his hand. I'm Elliot.
I saw your exhibit last night.
It was incredible. My heart skipped a beat. Someone had actually noticed. You were there? I didn't see you. I came late, he admitted. But I couldn't stop thinking about your work. The way you breathe new life into forgotten masterpieces. It's like magic. I felt a blush creeping up my cheeks. Thank you. That means a lot. Elliot's eyes sparkled with genuine enthusiasm. Your art speaks volumes. It's like you're restoring more than just the paintings. For a moment, I was speechless. No one had ever described my work that way before. Thank you, I managed. That's exactly what I try to do. He nodded, then gestured to his guitar case. I'm a musician myself. I was wondering if you'd be interested in collaborating on a project. Your visual art, my music, I think we could create something really special. I hesitated. Collaborating with a stranger seemed risky, especially given my current emotional state. But there was something about Elliot's earnest expression that made me want to trust him. I'd like that, I found myself saying. Why don't we grab coffee and discuss it? As we sat in a nearby cafe, Elliot's passion for his craft was infectious. He spoke of melodies and harmonies the way I thought about color and texture. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen and understood. So, what inspired you to become an art restorer? Elliot asked, sipping his latte. I paused, memories of childhood disappointments flooding back. I've always loved bringing beauty back into the world, I said carefully. Sometimes things get overlooked or forgotten, but that doesn't mean they're not valuable. Elliot's gaze softened. Sounds like there's a story there. I took a deep breath, surprised to find myself opening up. My family, they've never really understood my work. Or me, for that matter. Last night was supposed to be my big moment, but they couldn't even be bothered to show up. That must have hurt, Elliot said gently. I nodded, blinking back unexpected tears. It did. But you know what? I'm done letting their opinions define me. I blocked them all last night. It's time I focus on my own happiness. Elliot reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Good for you. It takes courage to stand up for yourself like that. His touch sent a jolt of electricity through me. I looked into his eyes and saw not pity, but admiration and understanding. In that moment, I felt a spark of something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. As we continued talking, making plans for our collaboration, I realized that this chance meeting might be the beginning of something truly special. For the first time in years, I felt seen, appreciated, and excited about the future. Walking home that evening, I felt lighter than I had in ages. My family's absence still stung, but it no longer felt like a gaping wound. Instead, I was filled with a quiet determination. I would build a life filled with people who truly valued me, starting with Elliot. I smiled to myself, thinking of the blank canvas waiting in my studio. It was time to start painting my own masterpiece. 6 months flew by in a whirlwind of creativity and newfound happiness. Elliot and I threw ourselves into our collaboration, his music breathing life into my restored paintings in ways I never imagined possible. We'd grown close, our relationship blossoming from artistic partners to something much deeper. But reality had a way of creeping in. One chilly autumn morning, I sat at our tiny kitchen table, staring at a pile of unpaid bills. Elliot walked in, his hair tousled from sleep. "Morning beautiful," he said, kissing the top of my head. "What's wrong?" I sighed, pushing the papers towards him. "We're barely scraping by, Elliot. The museum cut my hours again and your gigs." He nodded, understanding. "I know. We'll figure it out, Cheryl. We always do." I wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at me. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a notification. Against my better judgment, I checked it. It was an Instagram post from Felix. My breath caught as I saw him grinning beside a shiny new sports car, my parents beaming proudly in the background. The caption read, "Thanks for the early birthday present, Mom and Dad. You're the best." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. They bought Felix a car for his birthday. I told Elliot, trying to mask my hurt. Meanwhile, we can barely afford groceries. Elliot's face darkened. "That's not fair, Cheryl. You work just as hard as your brothers." "Harder," I muttered. "But it doesn't matter. Nothing I do will ever be good enough for them." Elliot pulled me into a hug. "You're more than good enough. Your family just can't see it." I clung to him, fighting back tears. I thought cutting them off would make it easier, but sometimes I still wish they could see me, really see me. "I see you," Elliot said softly, "and I love every part of you." His words warmed my heart, but the ache remained. I pulled away, determination setting in. I need to confront them, once and for all. Elliot looked concerned. "Are you sure? You don't owe them anything." "I owe it to myself," I said firmly. "I can't move forward until I face this." He nodded, understanding. "Do you want me to come with you?" I shook my head. "No, this is something I need to do alone." The drive to my parents' house felt surreal. I hadn't been here in months, not since that disastrous night at the gallery. As I pulled into the driveway, memories flooded back. Years of feeling invisible, of striving for approval that never came. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. My mother answered, her surprise evident. "Cheryl, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk, Mom," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She hesitated, then stepped aside to let me in. Dad was in the living room, looking up from his newspaper with a frown. "What's this about?" he asked. I stood tall, facing them both. "It's about how you've treated me my entire life. How you've always favored Jasper and Felix, no matter what I accomplished." Mom's face hardened. "That's ridiculous. We love all our children equally. Do you?" I challenged. "Then why can't you support my dreams the way you support theirs? Why do they get lavish gifts while I struggle to make ends meet?" Dad's frown deepened. "Your brothers have practical careers, Cheryl. We're just trying to set you up for success." By tearing me down? I shot back. By dismissing everything I'm passionate about? "We just want what's best for you," Mom insisted. "That Elliot, he can't provide for you the way a husband should." Anger flared in my chest. Elliot sees me for who I am. He supports my dreams. That's worth more than any amount of money. You need someone who can support you, not another artist, Mom remarked coldly. Something inside me snapped. No. What I need is parents who love me unconditionally, who celebrate my accomplishments instead of constantly comparing me to my brothers. But I see now that I'll never have that from you. I turned to leave, my heart pounding. At the door, I paused, looking back at their stunned faces. I'm done trying to earn your approval. From now on, I'm living for myself. As I walked out, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead might be uncertain, but for the first time in my life, I was truly free. I drove home from my parents' house in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The confrontation had left me emotionally raw, but underneath the pain, I felt a glimmer of something new. Freedom. Elliot was waiting for me when I got home, his face etched with concern. How did it go? I collapsed into his arms, letting out a shuddering breath. It was awful. And liberating. I told him everything, Elliot. How I've felt invisible my whole life, how they've always favored the twins. He stroked my hair gently. I'm proud of you, Cheryl. That took guts. I pulled back, wiping my eyes. They didn't even try to understand. Mom actually said I need someone who can support me, not another artist. Elliot's jaw clenched. That's ridiculous. We support each other in ways that matter. I know, I said, squeezing his hand. I told them I'm done trying to earn their approval. From now on, we're living for us. A slow smile spread across Elliot's face. I like the sound of that. Over the next few weeks, we threw ourselves into our work with renewed passion. Elliot landed a regular gig at a trendy downtown bar, while I poured my emotions into a series of original paintings. It felt like we were finally gaining momentum. But just as things were looking up, reality came crashing down again. I was at the museum, carefully restoring a delicate watercolor, when my boss approached with a grim expression. Cheryl, can I speak with you in my office? My stomach dropped as I followed her. She closed the door behind us, her voice gentle but firm. I'm sorry, but we're going to have to let you go. Budget cuts, you understand. I nodded numbly, barely hearing her reassurances about references and severance pay. As I packed at my desk, my phone buzzed with a text from Jasper. Hey sis, guess what? Got promoted to head surgeon. Mom and Dad are throwing a huge party next week. You should come. I stared at the message, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Of course. Another celebration I wasn't invited to, another reminder of the golden child I could never be. When I got home, Elliot was pacing the living room, his face pale. Cheryl, we need to talk. What's wrong? I asked, dread settling in my stomach. He ran a hand through his hair. The bar owner called. They're closing down. I'm out of a job. We stood in silence, the weight of our situation crushing down on us. No jobs, mounting bills, and a family that couldn't care less. What are we going to do? I whispered. Elliot pulled me close. We'll figure it out. We always do, remember? But as the days wore on, our optimism began to fade. We scoured job listings, took on freelance gigs, anything to make ends meet. I even swallowed my pride and called my parents, hoping they might offer some help. I'm sorry, Cheryl, my father said, his voice cold. But you made your choice. You can't expect us to bail you out now. I hung up, fighting back tears of frustration. That night, as Elliot and I sat at our kitchen table, surrounded by unpaid bills, I felt the walls closing in. Maybe, I started, hating the words even as they left my mouth. Maybe we should consider moving back to my hometown, at least until we get back on our feet. Elliot's eyes widened. Cheryl, no. After everything your family's put you through? I know, I said, my voice cracking. But what choice do we have? We're drowning here. He took my hands in his gaze intense. We have each other. That's all we need. We'll find a way, I promise. I wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at me. As we went to bed that night, I stared at the ceiling, torn between my love for Elliot and the harsh realities we faced. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow we'd make a plan. But as sleep finally claimed me, one thought echoed in my mind. How much longer could we hold on before everything fell apart? Despite our financial struggles, Elliot and I decided to move forward with our wedding plans. We couldn't afford much, but we were determined to celebrate our love on our own terms. The morning of the wedding, I stood in front of the mirror in Aunt Lorraine's spare bedroom, smoothing down my simple white dress. It wasn't the designer gown my mother had always envisioned for me, but it felt right. Aunt Lorraine appeared behind me, her eyes misty. "You look beautiful, Cheryl." I turned to hug her. "Thank you for everything, Aunt Lorraine. For letting us have the wedding here, for supporting us." She squeezed me tight. "That's what family is supposed to do, sweetie." A knock at the door interrupted us. To my surprise, my parents stood there, looking uncomfortable in their formal wear. "Can we come in?" Mom asked hesitantly. I nodded, steeling myself. They entered, their eyes taking in my appearance. "You look nice," Dad said awkwardly. "Thanks," I replied, the word feeling hollow. An uncomfortable silence fell. Finally, Mom spoke. "Cheryl, are you sure about this? It's not too late to reconsider." I felt my jaw clench. "Reconsider marrying the man I love?" "You know what we mean," Dad interjected. This whole situation, the tiny wedding, Elliot's unstable career. You deserve better. Better than what? Love? Support? Someone who sees me for who I am. I shot back. Mom sighed. "We just want you to have a secure future." "My future is with Elliot," I said firmly. "If you can't accept that, maybe you shouldn't be here." They exchanged a look, then nodded stiffly. "We'll see you at the ceremony," Dad said as they left. I took a deep breath, fighting back tears. Aunt Lorraine squeezed my shoulder. "Don't let them ruin your day, honey. This is about you and Elliot." The ceremony was small but beautiful, held in Aunt Lorraine's backyard. As I walked down the makeshift aisle, I saw Elliot beaming at me, his eyes filled with love. In that moment, all my doubts melted away. Our vows were simple but heartfelt. "Cheryl," Elliot said, his voice thick with emotion, "you've shown me what it means to truly be seen and loved. I promise to stand by you, to support your dreams, and to remind you every day how amazing you are." Tears streamed down my face as I replied, "Elliot, you've given me the strength to be myself. I promise to love you fiercely, to face whatever challenges come our way together, and to never let you forget how much you're valued." As we shared our first kiss as husband and wife, I caught sight of my parents in the small crowd. Their expressions were unreadable, a mix of resignation and something else I couldn't quite place. At the modest reception, I overheard my father talking to Jasper. "It's not what we imagined for you," he commented, glancing around the modest venue. I felt a flash of anger, but before I could respond, a familiar voice cut in. "I think it's perfect," Grandma Mabel said, appearing at my side. "It's a celebration of love, not a show of wealth." She turned to me, her eyes twinkling. "Cheryl, dear, I have something for you." From her purse, she pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a stunning antique necklace, delicate gold filigree surrounding a deep blue sapphire. "This has been in our family for generations," Grandma Mabel explained. "I've always planned to give it to the grandchild who truly understood the value of family. That's you, Cheryl." As she fastened the necklace around my neck, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. This was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of acceptance and love. "Thank you, Grandma," I whispered, hugging her tightly. As the reception continued, I caught my mother eyeing the necklace with a mix of surprise and something that looked almost like jealousy. But I pushed those thoughts aside. Today wasn't about them. It was about Elliot and me and the life we were building together. As we danced under the twinkling lights, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, surrounded by the people who truly loved us for who we were. 3 months after our wedding, Grandma Mabel insisted on hosting a family gathering to celebrate her 80th birthday. Despite my reservations, Elliot and I decided to attend. We hadn't seen my family since the wedding, and I hoped that time might have softened some of the tension. As we pulled up to Grandma's sprawling Victorian home, I felt a knot form in my stomach. Elliot squeezed my hand reassuringly. "We've got this," he whispered. Inside, the atmosphere was strained. My parents greeted us with forced smiles, while Jasper and Felix barely acknowledged our presence. Only Grandma Mabel seemed genuinely happy to see us, enveloping me in a warm hug. "I'm so glad you're here, dear," she said, her eyes twinkling. "I have a special announcement to make later." As the afternoon wore on, I found myself retreating to the kitchen, needing a moment away from the thinly veiled judgmental glances. To my surprise, Aunt Lorraine was there, pouring herself a generous glass of wine. "Rough day?" she asked, offering me a glass. I nodded, gratefully accepting. "I don't know why I thought things would be different." Aunt Lorraine sighed. "Family's complicated, sweetie. But remember, you're stronger than you know." Before I could respond, Grandma Mabel's voice rang out from the living room. "Everyone, gather around. I have something important to say." We filed back in, tension thick in the air. Grandma stood in the center of the room, her posture straight and proud despite her age. "As you all know, I've lived a long and blessed life," she began. "And as I've gotten older, I've been thinking about my legacy, about what truly matters." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room before landing on me. "That's why I've decided to leave my entire estate to Cheryl." The room erupted in chaos. My parents gasped, Jasper knocked over a vase in shock, and Felix's face turned an alarming shade of red. "What?" Felix sputtered. "That's not fair. We're family too." Grandma Mabel held up a hand, silencing the room. "Cheryl has always been the one who truly understood the value of family. Not in terms of money or status, but in love, support, and understanding." She turned to me, her eyes filled with warmth. "You've always been there for me, dear, even when it wasn't easy. You've shown resilience and grace in the face of adversity. You've built a life based on love and passion, not expectations and materialism." I felt tears welling up in my eyes, overwhelmed by her words. Elliot's arm tightened around my waist, a silent pillar of support. "This is ridiculous," Jasper interjected. "She must have manipulated you somehow." Grandma's eyes flashed with anger. "I may be old, Jasper, but I'm not senile. This is my decision and it's final." My mother stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Mom, please. Think about what you're doing. Cheryl doesn't need Dash." "Doesn't need what, Evelyn?" Grandma cut her off. "The support you've never given her? The recognition of her worth that you've always denied her." The room fell silent, the weight of years of unspoken resentment hanging heavy in the air. I found my voice at last. "Grandma,
I don't know what to say."
"Thank you doesn't seem enough." She smiled, taking my hands in hers. "You don't need to say anything, dear. Just promise me you'll use this to build the life you've always dreamed of. The life you deserve." As I nodded, tears streaming down my face, I caught sight of my brothers. Their expressions were a mix of shock, anger, and something that looked almost like regret. My father cleared his throat. "Mabel, surely we can discuss this. There must be a more equitable solution." Grandma's voice was steel. "There's nothing to discuss, Martin. My mind is made up." As the reality of the situation sank in, I could feel the shift in the room. The looks directed at me changed from dismissal to barely concealed resentment. I knew that this moment, while validating, would irrevocably change my relationship with my family. Elliot's voice was low in my ear. "We should go." I nodded, suddenly feeling suffocated by the tension. As we made our way to the door, Grandma Mabel's words echoed in my mind. This was more than just an inheritance. It was a chance to rewrite my story, to build a life free from the shadows of my past. But as we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a storm that had been brewing for years. The days following Grandma Mabel's announcement were a whirlwind of emotions and tense phone calls. I'd barely had time to process the enormity of her gift when my parents demanded a family meeting at their house. As Elliot and I pulled into the driveway, I felt a sense of dread settling in my stomach. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea, I murmured. Elliot squeezed my hand. We'll face this together. Remember, you've done nothing wrong. The moment we stepped inside, the tension was palpable. My parents sat stiffly on the couch, while Jasper and Felix paced the room like caged animals. Sit down, my father commanded, his voice cold. I took a deep breath and sat, Elliot a steady presence beside me. This has to stop, Cheryl, my mother began, her voice trembling with barely contained anger. You need to renounce the inheritance. It's not fair to your brothers. I felt a flash of indignation. Not fair? When has anything ever been fair in this family? Felix slammed his hand on the coffee table. This isn't fair, Cheryl, he argued, his entitlement clear. We deserve it just as much as you. Deserve it. I shot back, years of pent-up frustration bubbling to the surface. What exactly have you done to deserve it, besides being the golden children who could do no wrong? Jasper stepped forward, his face red. That's rich coming from you. Always playing the victim, never taking responsibility for your own failures. Failures? Elliot interjected, his voice sharp. Cheryl is incredibly talented and hardworking. Just because her success doesn't fit your narrow definition dash. Stay out of this, my father snapped. This is a family matter. I stood up, anger coursing through me. Elliot is my family, the only one who's truly supported me. My mother's eyes filled with tears. How can you say that? We've always wanted what's best for you. No, I said, my voice steady. You've always wanted what you thought was best for me. You never bothered to ask what I wanted, what would make me happy. And this makes you happy? Jasper sneered, taking advantage of Grandma's senility. I felt my hands clench into fists. How dare you? Grandma is of sound mind, and she made this decision because she sees me for who I am. Something none of you have ever bothered to do. Enough, my father roared. Cheryl, you will renounce this inheritance, or you'll no longer be welcome in this family. The room fell silent, the weight of his ultimatum hanging heavy in the air. I looked around at the faces of my family, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, and saw only anger, resentment, and greed. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The last threads of hope I'd been clinging to, that someday they might see me, might value me, snapped. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. What did you say? My mother gasped. I straightened my spine, meeting each of their gazes in turn. I said no. I won't renounce the inheritance. Grandma made her decision, and I'm honoring it. Felix lunged forward, but Elliot stepped between us. Back off, he warned. You ungrateful little dash, Jasper started, but I cut him off. I'm done, I said, surprising myself with how calm I felt. I'm done trying to earn your love, your approval. I'm done dimming my light to make you comfortable. This inheritance isn't just about money. It's about recognizing my worth, something you've never been able to do. I turned to my parents, seeing the shock on their faces. You said I wouldn't be welcome in this family if I didn't renounce the inheritance. Well, let me make it easy for you. I don't want to be part of a family that only values me when I'm giving them something. I took Elliot's hand, drawing strength from his presence. We're leaving now. Don't try to contact us. As we walked out the door, I heard my mother's sobs and my father's angry shouts. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. In the car, Elliot turned to me, his eyes filled with concern and pride. Are you okay? I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. You know what? I think I am. For the first time, I'm really okay. As we drove away from my childhood home, I realized that this wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning, a chance to build a life filled with love, respect, and true family, the kind that sees you for who you really are. 2 years after the explosive confrontation with my family, Elliot and I stood hand in hand on the balcony of our new home. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the bustling art district below. It was a far cry from the cramped apartment we'd shared when we first got married. Can you believe it? Elliot whispered, squeezing my hand. We did it, Cheryl. We built this together. I leaned into him, feeling a sense of peace I'd never known before. It's more than I ever dreamed possible. The inheritance from Grandma Mabel had been a turning point, but it wasn't just about the money. It was the validation, the recognition of my worth that had given me the strength to pursue my passions without fear or guilt. We'd used the funds to open a small gallery, showcasing both my restored artworks and Elliot's music. It had been a risk, but one that paid off beyond our wildest expectations. People were drawn to the unique combination of visual and auditory art, and soon we'd gained a reputation as innovators in the local art scene. As we gazed out at the city, I thought about how far we'd come. The struggles, the doubts, the painful severing of toxic family ties, it had all led us here. Cheryl? Elliot's voice pulled me from my thoughts. There's something I want to show you. He led me back inside to his music room, where a canvas stood covered in the corner. With a flourish, he pulled off the cloth, revealing a stunning portrait of me. But it wasn't just me as I was now. The painting showed different versions of myself at various ages, from a wide-eyed child to the woman I'd become. Each version was emerging from shadows into light, growing stronger and more vibrant. Elliot, I gasped, tears welling in my eyes. It's beautiful, but I thought you were a musician, not a painter. He grinned sheepishly. I've been taking lessons in secret. I wanted to show you how I see you, how you've always been this incredible, resilient person, even when others couldn't see it. I threw my arms around him, overwhelmed by the love and understanding in this gesture. This was what true family meant, seeing and celebrating each other's growth, supporting each other's dreams. As we held each other, the doorbell rang. Puzzled, I went to answer it. To my shock, Aunt Lorraine stood there, looking nervous. I hope I'm not intruding, she said hesitantly. I wanted to see how you were doing. I invited her in, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. As we sat in the living room, she looked around in awe. This place is amazing, Cheryl. You've really made something beautiful here. Thank you, I said, still cautious. But why are you here, Aunt Lorraine? She sighed, her eyes filling with tears. I've been thinking a lot about family lately, about the mistakes we've made, the hurt we've caused. I wanted you to know that I'm proud of you, Cheryl, for standing up for yourself, for building this life. Her words hit me like a wave, washing away the last remnants of doubt and guilt I'd been carrying. That means a lot, Aunt Lorraine. Thank you. We talked for hours, rebuilding a relationship on new, healthier terms. As she was leaving, she paused at the door. Your parents and brothers, they're starting to realize what they've lost. They might not be ready to admit it yet, but they miss you. I nodded, feeling a twinge of sadness, but no regret. If they ever want to be part of my life again, they'll have to accept me for who I am. All of me. After she left, I found Elliot in the gallery downstairs, tuning his guitar for tomorrow's performance. He looked up as I entered, his face softening at my expression. You okay? He asked. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. More than okay. I'm happy, Elliot. Truly, deeply happy. He set down his guitar and pulled me close. That's all I've ever wanted for you, love. As we stood there, surrounded by the art we'd created together, I realized that this was the family I'd always longed for. One built on love, respect, and mutual support. The road hadn't been easy, but every struggle had led me here, to this moment of pure contentment. I may have started this journey as the forgotten daughter, but I'd emerged as something far greater, a woman who had found her voice, her passion, and her true family. And that was worth more than any inheritance could ever be.
After not seeing him for a month, John thrust a divorce lawyer's business card at me without even asking, "Are you okay?" or "How are you feeling?" Divorcing a wife who doesn't work, pay me $1,000 a month as alimony sounds good. Take care, John chuckled as he said this, standing beside him. Emily was wrapping her arm around him, wearing a similar smug expression. Fine, let's undivorce then, I said, so casually that John seemed a bit surprised. but he quickly shared his smile with Emily. Good thing JN isn't much of a thinker. It makes my plan easier to execute. After the divorce papers got approved, I decided to start my revenge plan on both of them. I will make them cry as a celebration of my recovery. My name is Sarah Wolf. I'm a 47-year-old illustrator. I also work as a children's book author. I just love drawing. I have 2 childhood friends, JN and Emily. They're important friends to me, and JN is also my husband. It all started when John asked me out as I was heading to a different college after high school. I was surprised. I thought he was into Emily, but I couldn't say no to a confession from John, whom I had secretly liked. After some thought and consultation with Emily, I accepted John's proposal. Emily's behavior had been a bit problematic since our teens, but she was still a dear friend to both John and me. However, Emily had a tendency to snatch other people's boyfriends and then dump them once they became obsessed with her, causing problems time and again. Her parents were concerned, so John and I often spent time with her to watch over her. John and I got married. When we were 25, 4 years later, Emily brought her fiancé into our lives. His name was George, a professional working for a top-tier company. Nice to meet you, Sarah and John. I've heard so much about you. Looking forward to our future together, George said. He was very polite, and we all got along immediately. We would get together during holidays and vacations, taking trips or going on long train rides to enjoy some drinks. However, things started falling apart after Emily got pregnant 2 years into her marriage. John and I originally had many siblings, so there was no worry about an heir, so we decided we didn't need children. Both of us love kids but weren't keen on actively caring for them. Besides, we loved our freedom to travel and enjoy drinks. We often found it heartwarming to see families with children, but it was never more or less than that. When Emily announced her pregnancy, John's attitude started to change. He quit smoking because Emily said she couldn't stand the smell and even offered to drive her to her doctor's appointments using his vacation days. I warned him, George might get upset if you're always with Emily, but John argued back, you have work, don't you? She's our childhood friend, and she's reaching out for help. You're heartless. I've been buying things and helping where I can, but going with her to the obstetrician is crossing the line, I said. When I said that, John frowned, then glared at me. Why? Because Emily wants it, right? She says she's anxious about the checkup. I can't just let her go alone. If she's anxious, all the more reason for George to go with her, right? If you go with her every time, it's almost like you're the father of the baby in her belly. John grew jealous. You're not going to get pregnant anyway, so what's the problem? He didn't take my concerns seriously and instead started to snap, saying I was being annoying. We had hardly ever had a fight during our marriage, but things changed when Emily got pregnant. Our arguments increased, and that didn't change even after Emily gave birth. In fact, JN started spending even more time with Emily and their child, Emma. But when Emma was 6, an incident occurred. It had to do with the attendees of Emma's graduation ceremonies. The day before the graduation, John suddenly started rummaging through the closet. John, what are you doing? Have a meeting tomorrow. John's workplace had a casual dress code, but there was a rule to wear a suit during client meetings, so he always kept a few suits ready. But they were all thrown on the bed. Now, no. Just trying to decide what to wear for the graduation ceremony. What? You're seriously thinking of attending the graduation? Yeah, George can't make it. Emily asked me. Wait, that's absurd. No matter how you look at it, I inadvertently raised my voice in denial. Immediately, John's face turned sour. I knew he occasionally picked Emma up from kindergarten, and I had done so myself when asked. Yet, it was nonsensical for a childhood friend who wasn't even a biological parent to attend a graduation ceremony. What, you still doubt me and Emily? I'm disappointed that you can't even help out. That's not the point. Anyway, I'm attending the graduation tomorrow, so iron a shirt properly, John said, abruptly ending the conversation, leaving me behind and going to the bedroom. I had no choice but to call Emily. Hello, Emily, about tomorrow. Sorry about tomorrow. I'm borrowing John, But won't George be upset about the graduation attendance, Sarah? What are you talking about? Obviously, I haven't told George that the graduation is tomorrow. I'll tell him after the ceremony. I was shocked to learn that George didn't know about the graduation schedule. Upon further questioning, it seemed that Emily hadn't informed George about any of the kindergarten events so far, and John had been acting as the father at the kindergarten, which made me dizzy with its selfishness. Wait a minute, Emily, isn't that extremely unreasonable? It's disrespectful to George, and just because he's a childhood friend. What's wrong, Sarah? You're scary. Well, see you tomorrow. Wait, Emily. I was trembling with anger at Emily, who unilaterally hung up the phone. Still, in the end, I ironed a shirt, prepared a tie, and the next morning saw John off to Emma's graduation ceremony. Since then, Emily and John started going out more frequently, from once a month to once a week, and then to 3 times a week. Eventually, even George seemed to have some suspicions. And one day, while John and Emily were out, he visited our house alone. I'm sorry for visiting you late at night. There's something that's been bothering me. Is it about the two of them? Yes. I would like you to take a look at this. George showed me the GPS history he had installed in Emily's car. It showed that she had been staying at a hotel 3 times a week. All of those days she was out with JN. And just by looking at George's face, I understood what that meant. What do you want to do, George? I want to take revenge on those two. Me too. I can't forgive them for betraying us after all this time. We started planning our revenge on them secretly. First, I started by increasing my income because I had been saving by doing housework and taking care of Emma. My income had drastically decreased. George switched to working from home, and when Emily and John would go out, he would bring Emma to my house, and we would take care of her together. Neither Emily nor John realized that we knew about the relationship, and we were able to gather solid evidence. Once we had collected enough evidence and were ready to take our revenge, we discovered a shocking truth about Emma. George and I struggled with the decision, but we both agreed that we didn't want to hurt young Emma. So we decided to wait until she was an adult to take our revenge. However, even though we decided to endure for 10 years, I was struck with a serious illness. I needed long-term hospitalization, and even at best, I wouldn't be discharged for at least 2 years. Although I could work from the hospital room, it was certain that I would have to reduce my workload. After informing George about the situation, I consulted John. However, John's reaction was no different from when we were making small talk. I'll visit you once in a while, he said. I felt that JN no longer had any affection for me, as he didn't even ask about my condition or the name of the disease. In reality, JN only visited once a month or once every 2 months. And after Emma's 15th birthday, she started acting strangely. Although she used to visit me almost every day right after I was hospitalized, she became distant after her 15th birthday. However, neither George nor I could figure out why, and we were puzzled. Even when we asked Emma, she just said, "Don't worry about it." However, we ended up learning the reason from John, who rarely showed up. Hey, it's been a while. Yeah, it has. JN, who had completely transformed into a flashy appearance, walked in without even knocking. After not seeing him for a month, John just thrust a divorce lawyer's business card at me without even asking, "Are you okay?" or "How are you feeling?" Divorcing a wife who doesn't work, pay me $1,000 a month as alimony. That's the deal, so take care, John said, grinning from ear to ear. Beside him, Emily wrapped her arms around JN with a similar expression on her face. Fine, let's divorce then, I casually agreed, which seemed to surprise Jay for a moment, but he quickly exchanged smiles with Emily. It was good that JN wasn't the type to think too deeply. That's why my plan worked so well. After receiving a notification that the divorce was finalized from John, I decided to start my revenge plan against the two of them. I will make them cry as a celebration of my recovery. I promptly started to take action. First, I contacted George to transfer hospitals. Then I informed my lawyer that they would be mediating between the two parties from now on. George also began to act at the same time. He moved near my new hospital with Emma, and he started to visit me frequently. Emma still had a gloomy expression, but I was happy that she came to see me every day. Most of my belongings were already in the hospital room, so I told John to dispose of the rest. I didn't want to bring anything that the two of them might have touched into my new life. Once the hospital transfer and George and Emma's move settled down, I received a call from John. I had only left my seat for a few minutes, but my smartphone already showed 30 missed calls. I answered the phone, feeling exasperated. What? Hey, what the hell is going on? I could hear the voice of a troubled real estate agent behind John's panicked voice. I also heard Emily yelling, which made me feel sick. What do you mean? What's going on? I asked. It's obviously about the house. Why do we have to move out? John shouted at me, as if it wasn't his fault at all. I replied to him coolly, obviously, because that's my house. JN seemed to have completely forgotten, but the truth was the house we lived in was a room I rented as a workspace when I started to make a living as a freelancer. At that time, I didn't have enough income to maintain 2 houses, and John didn't have enough income to live alone, so he ended up moving into my place. Therefore, John had never paid the rent or utility bills for that room. Although I received some money from him for living expenses, it wasn't enough to maintain the place. Unfortunately, that room was already cancelled. It was far from the hospital I transferred to, so I had processed the cancellation the day after submitting the divorce papers. I didn't inform him because the real estate agent who knew the situation said they would contact him. George and Emma suddenly disappeared, and our house was sold. What are we going to do about our new house? I don't know. Maybe stay in a business hotel for now, I said, as I turned on the speaker and started working. John yelled in frustration, "Don't screw with me." However, he seemed to remember something and started speaking in a more soothing tone. Well, whatever. When will you transfer the money? We're running low on cash. What are you talking about? Ha! Don't mess around. I told you to pay $11,000, didn't I? Oh, I don't recall agreeing to that. My nonchalant response was met with incoherent screaming from John on the other end of the phone. Apparently, he thought he could get money from me and had been squandering it even. If he had $11,000 left, how did he plan to get by for the rest of the month? Hey, don't just stay silent. Say something. There's really nothing to talk about. My retort left John momentarily dumbfounded, but he soon started yelling again, growing increasingly annoyed. I addressed JN in as cheerful a tone as I could muster. Anyway, we're basically strangers now, so please don't contact me anymore. You'll hear from my lawyer. Ha? Lawyer? Hey, wait a minute. I hung up without listening to John's response. He tried calling back several times, but I ignored it, and eventually, the calls stopped. However, angry that I didn't answer, John started ignoring calls from my lawyer. He certainly had a childish side, but I never imagined he'd be the kind of person who didn't mind causing trouble for others. I sighed deeply at John's selfishness. A few months later, after a temporary discharge from the hospital, I visited John's parents' house. In front of me were JN and Emily, both looking small and trembling. You tell him my parents? It's a low blow. Oh, I just reported that we got divorced. John glared at me in response to my answer, but he shrank back under his father's stern gaze. Actually, I had a great relationship with my in-laws, even visiting and dining with them when John wasn't around. Despite being so well loved, I felt it was wrong not to share the details of our divorce, so I went to visit them. Is it true that you're remarrying Emily? Yes, it's true, Emily interjected. Emma and I are going to start over as a family. What are you talking about? Your only family is Sarah. She's not my family anymore. John's words made his father frown, with a look that seemed to say, give me a break. JN shook his head a few times, then handed me a piece of paper. It was a bill from a nearby luxury hotel. What's this? It's the bill from the hotel. We stayed as John, acting as if it was obvious, pointed at the bill on the table, then suddenly collapsed. Oh, what the heck, Mom? I didn't raise you to be like this. My mother-in-law, gasping for breath, was met with a look of disbelief from John. Next to him, Emily wore the same expression. Why are you so angry? It's just that the family is changing because I'm getting married. Plus, you'll have a grandchild, a blood-related one at that. Aren't you happy? You too didn't. My mother-in-law, looking as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing, glanced at me, then turned her gaze to Emily. Both my in-laws understood that I didn't want children and still treated me as their own daughter. Of course, they treated Emily, my childhood friend, similarly, but there was always a boundary between a daughter-in-law and a friend. I remembered Emily often complaining about that, so I was certain my mother-in-law wouldn't be happy about this situation, and Emily should have known it too. You do, Emma, right? It'll be your grandchild, so you'll be happy, right? It's because she's a child I've known since she was little. Oh, but half of her blood is from John, right? Even after all this, Emily, showing no sign of remorse and acting as if she couldn't understand the problem, gave me goosebumps. At that moment, someone who had been silent until now spoke up. Enough already. It's disgusting. Hot Emma, who had been playing with her smartphone in the corner of the room, spoke to Emily without looking up. The room fell into stunned silence. My dad is the only one I consider my father, whether we're related by blood or not. He's the only one. But you know, JN has always been the one to attend your school events. I heard everything from Dad, how he was always informed of the event dates after they were over, how eventually even the events themselves were kept from him. But Dad always said I was his daughter, so I am his daughter, and I will never be yours. Emma glared at Emily as she said this. Then, sitting beside me, she switched to a more concerned tone. You know, when I found out about this, I thought you would hate me. But Dad said that wasn't the case, so I came here today, Emma. I love you so much. You were so kind to visit me every day while I was in the hospital. I was really happy, Sarah expressed, feeling a rush of affection towards Emma. Perhaps relieved of her anxiety, Emma teared up and hugged Sarah tightly. It might indeed be a child resulting from an affair between John and Emily, yet it's a child I've taken care of for 15 years. There's no way I don't have affection for her. Speaking of which, Emily, weren't you curious why I wasn't surprised when I found out Emma is John's daughter? Sarah asked, her tone now tinged with curiosity. Before Emily could respond, a new person entered the room. It was George, whom we knew from the start, 10 years ago. Actually, George suddenly appeared, understandably so, as she had recently unilaterally demanded a divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. I was shocked when you mentioned divorce. Oh, and unfortunately, you're not divorced yet. The divorce papers are still here. Didn't you notice? George revealed, causing a collective gasp in the room. Sarah figured it wasn't in Emily and John's nature to confirm things, but she couldn't help but be stunned that Emily, despite the 100-day waiting period for women to remarry, had noticed for months. So, Emily is still my wife, and Emma is still my daughter. Well, since there won't be a wife, though, John's voice trailed off as realization dawned on him. Wait, what do you mean a 15-year-old can choose their parent? That's not true. Emma wants to be with Mom, right? Emily said. With that, I looked at Emma. Emma frowned at Emily and held my hand. Emily was speechless at that and glared at me. Then, John suddenly burst into laughter. So that's what it is. You two are together, huh? But too bad, isn't it impossible to live on George's salary alone? Can you stop making weird assumptions? John's laughter filled the room, but his tone turned mocking. Also, it seems George earns double the amount you think, Emily. Know about it, huh? It's probably a bluff, though. Besides, it's impossible for you to work while dealing with your illness. You'll just die miserably somewhere, John continued, his words laced with sarcasm. This time, I laughed at John's huge misunderstanding. Seeing me start laughing, John was getting frustrated. You didn't know about my income, did you? Ha. It's probably just a bit more than a part-time job. No, it's different. My annual income is $500,000, I stated confidently, a smirk playing on my lips. John's eyes and mouth were wide open in shock. Emily was also stunned. In fact, over the past 10 years, I had become a popular children's book author, and my income had skyrocketed from essays, interviews, and more. Moreover, a film adaptation was planned soon, so my income was skyrocketing. Liar. Oh, do you want to see this? I said, showing Emily my bank account screen, which clearly showed a large amount of money being deposited every month. Emily was at a loss for words when she saw it. "Sarah, let's, make up, huh?" John's tone softened, but I was not swayed. "What are you saying?" Emily was furious at John's words, blinded by the money. I watched them blankly and then opened my mouth. "Well, if you want to get married, feel free." "Oh, and I'll definitely take the compensation for damages, Sarah," I said firmly, ignoring John's attempts to intervene. "Wait, Sarah. Sarah." Ignoring John's pleas, I took Emma's hand, and after saying goodbye to my in-laws, I left their house. John originally worked at my father-in-law's company, but it was revealed that he was lying about going out for sales, and he was fired. My father-in-law planned to forcibly put him on a friend's fishing boat and work him to the bone. Working on a fishing boat was tough for an indoor-loving John, and he contacted me several times, but each time, I notified my father-in-law, and eventually, the calls stopped. Emily lost custody to George and got divorced. She seemed uninterested in John, who couldn't afford luxuries and didn't seem to chase after him. She was disowned by her family and lived alone in a run-down apartment. She hadn't worked at all since getting married, and since she had always made others do things for her, she couldn't do anything herself. And there were hardly any places that would hire her as a full-time employee. Still, she had to pay for her living expenses and child support. So, she worked multiple part-time jobs and barely made ends meet. After entering high school, Emma worked hard every day to study abroad and go to a prestigious university overseas. Being originally diligent, her dream is to translate my picture books and deliver them to children all over the world, which makes me happy. As for me, my picture books are selling well, and I am receiving more and more offers for animated adaptations and merchandise. My illness is also progressing well, and although I am still hospitalized, my doctor recently told me that I might be able to leave the hospital next year. And one more thing, George and Emma come to visit me every day. Actually, George recently confessed to me with remarriage in mind. I haven't given my answer yet, but I can't help but have feelings for him. He said he wants to live together when I leave the hospital. While thinking about what to answer, I work on my picture books every day, hoping for a happy future for us. I weave stories again today. Thank you for being with us and listening until the end. If you found it interesting, please subscribe, give us a like, and leave your comments. We'll see you on the Retaliation Realm channel.
Welcome to the Retaliation Realm channel. We hope you enjoy today's story. Hi there, I'm Cora, stepping into a rather unusual story at 18. I've got a lot on my plate, especially with my cousin who's practically like a twin brother to me. You see, he was adopted at birth due to his mom's struggles with addiction, which led to some serious learning challenges for him. Think math and reading skills of someone much younger. He's a regular at summer school, always needing extra help. The thing is, he's not exactly the friendliest guy towards me, and I can't blame him. But truth be told, once I'm out of here, I'm out. Tutoring him? That's a hard pass for me. Recently, my parents found a tutoring program specialized in learning impairments, but here's the kicker, my dad was laid off due to the global crisis. Now, only my older sister and I work, so money's tight. Despite this, my parents feel compelled to get my cousin the services he needs. Dad sat us down earlier this week. They explained that my cousin might be held back if he doesn't get tutoring. Since my sister and I are his older siblings and they're not working, they expect us to pitch in financially. We instantly opposed this. My sister argued they had no right to ask, and I said my cousin wasn't my responsibility. But they shut us down, insisting that we're family and families support each other. It hit me that since they have access to my current bank account, they could withdraw money without my knowledge, leaving me with no recourse. It sounds like you've been put in a difficult spot, Cora. It's important to protect your hard-earned money and future. Opening a new bank account and transferring your funds was a proactive step to safeguard what's yours. Your parents may be struggling with their own challenges, but that doesn't mean you're obligated to cover expenses that aren't your responsibility. It's understandable that you don't want to see your brother suffer, but it's also valid to prioritize your own financial security. If your parents truly want to help your brother, there are other ways they can support him without touching your money. Perhaps your dad could personally tutor him during this period of unemployment. It's unfair for them to expect you to foot the bill without considering your own autonomy and financial needs. Remember, being 18 means you have the right to manage your bank account and make decisions about your finances. You and your sister are both adults, earning your own money, and that should be respected. It's essential to have an open and honest conversation with your parents about your concerns and boundaries. Express your willingness to support your brother emotionally, but emphasize that financial decisions regarding your money should be respected and discussed with you first. It sounds like you're in a challenging situation, and I understand your concerns about your parents' expectations and how it's affecting you and your sister. Firstly, it's important to clarify that your parents adopting your cousin does not mean you and your sister are responsible for covering all expenses related to his education or care. Adoption is a choice made by parents, and they have a responsibility to provide for their adopted child's needs. Regarding your parents potentially renting out rooms for additional income, that's a decision they would need to make based on their circumstances. However, expecting you and your sister to financially support your brother's education and their lifestyle is unfair, especially given that you are both working to support yourselves. If you live in the United States, your brother may indeed be eligible for free supplementary assistance through the school system if he has a diagnosed learning impairment. This could include an Individualized Education Program, IEP, or a 504p CORA to provide necessary support and accommodations. It's essential for your parents to explore these options rather than solely relying on you and your sister for financial support. You are right to take steps to protect your finances by opening a new bank account. It's crucial to ensure your direct deposits go into your new account to maintain control over your earnings. Considering the circumstances, it might be wise for you and your sister to PCORA for independence and limit financial dependence on your parents. Moving out and establishing your own living arrangements could provide you both with the autonomy and financial security you deserve. Remember, you have the right to prioritize your own future and well-being. It's okay to set boundaries and seek support from outside resources if needed. Take care of yourself and your sister during this challenging time. I have a corgi named Lila, and she has always been completely healthy and satisfied with the dog food I buy for her. While I needed to leave on a week-long business trip to Dubai, my boyfriend took care of feeding her. Unfortunately, the vacation was extended by 3 days due to airport delays and cancellations caused by a severe storm. I typically buy a 50-pound bag of dog food that lasts nearly a month and costs me around $40, depending on the store. It's a vet-recommended brand, not a low-cost off-brand, and I can get it inexpensively through her groomers. Upon returning home, I noticed that Lila had gained some weight, but not enough to be concerned. Her belly seemed pudgier than usual. When I checked the kitchen, I found her 50-pound bag of food untouched, replaced by a 25-pound bag of organic steak and chicken with a $79.99 price tag still attached. My boyfriend had purchased it using the money I left for emergencies. We have porcupines in our yard, so I assumed it was an emergency vet scenario, but it wasn't. Lila needs better food. During my absence, my boyfriend's mother stopped by, which isn't uncommon. She told him that the food I had been giving Lila was terrible and convinced them to switch to this pricey brand. Additionally, she started feeding Lila genuine cut-up meat like steak or chicken bits in her bowl. Since I've been home, Lila has refused to eat the food she's eaten her entire life. She has even begun to get up on the table. This situation is concerning because Lila's diet has been abruptly changed without my consent, and she's now rejecting her regular food. It's essential to gradually transition her back to her original diet to ensure she receives the proper nutrition she needs. I also need to discuss this issue with my boyfriend and his mother to establish boundaries regarding Lila's care and diet to prevent further disruptions. When I catch myself trying to get people food again, a habit I broke over a year and a half ago, to say I'm outraged would be an understatement. Given my financial situation, affording the $140 bag I purchased for her is out of reach. I was already upset after facing a budget cut and a 99.8% increase in property taxes. To make matters worse, my boyfriend's mom showed up and quickly rummaged through her pocketbook, grabbing steak chunks for my dog. I've always been clear that there should be no table scraps, and this dog show was the icing on the cake. I lost it. Now I feel like I'm completely losing it and have been labeled as mad, if not an imbecile. As someone who has a dog with severe food allergies, I understand the outrage. I spend hundreds of dollars on allergy medicines and am cautious about what my dog eats. If someone were to decide it wasn't good enough and modify it without my consent, I'd be furious. Furthermore, allowing a dog to get away with something you say no to only encourages them to test the boundaries again. It undoes the training that took time and effort to develop, which is completely unacceptable. If you become pregnant, your mother-in-law will undoubtedly overstep boundaries with your child, much like she did with your dog. She appears to be highly dominating and insists on getting her way. She didn't even consider whether the dog enjoyed the food. She believed it was terrible, so she decided the healthy dog needed something better, even if he was perfectly content with his existing meal. Wait until you have children with your mother-in-law. She's a unique person. This is a prospective grandmother who doesn't care what mom wants for the kids and a father who will do anything his mother wants him to do. As for myself, I'm a 34-year-old guy with a tween daughter named Amaya. She is a beautiful child. I met Amaya's mother and tried to get to know her, as her father was not present and did not want to be involved. On the day of our wedding, I officially adopted her and shocked her by informing her that I was now her father, and she was my daughter. Amaya is generally a very busy child, but with the current worldwide issue and now summer break, I've noticed that she will sit on the couch all day, watching TV and playing computer games as a result. Amidst the narrative, let's dive back into the story. I've noticed Amaya gaining significant weight. If you're enjoying the story so far, please show your support by liking and subscribing to our channel. I discussed my concerns with my wife, but she reassured me that Amaya is fine, especially since it's summer and she can relax with TV and junk food. While I understand her perspective, I don't want Amaya to develop unhealthy habits. To encourage some activity, I initiated father-daughter strolls. During our walks, we spent 30 minutes chatting about our day and PCOS. I gradually increased my pace from walking to jogging and eventually running. At first, Amaya struggled, but now she can keep up with me. I enjoy these moments because she gets a bit of exercise every day, and I cherish the time spent together. Unfortunately, my wife is not pleased. She approached me, accusing me of fat-shaming our daughter and forcing her to exercise. In her view, children are meant to watch television and eat junk food. She encourages Amaya to binge-watch TV, buys her favorite snacks, and tells her she doesn't need to join me for a run. She accuses me of imposing my lifestyle choices on our daughter, which leaves me feeling embarrassed after a few arguments. Certainly. Here's a revised version of your passage. She is considering sending Amaya to stay with her grandparents for the rest of the summer. I'm encouraging her to become more active. Am I the idiot? Not the imbecile. How come you're going for a run and forcing her to adopt healthy habits when her mother is buying her junk food? You did not fat shame her. Instead, you peacored an activity for the two of you to undertake together. And unless you omitted essential details, she enjoys it. So unless she has to be coerced into running with you and despises it, you are not wrong. The best thing you can do for your child is encourage them to live a healthy, active lifestyle. Your wife sucks here. Purposefully loading the house with junk food is a terrible thing to do to a youngster. The child should have access to a variety of nutritious foods. You suck too for making this about weight loss and appearance rather than simply telling your kid to develop healthy behaviors. Making her run seems excessive, especially if she dislikes it. Here's a revised version of your passage with improved clarity and structure. Walking and talking about the day is a better approach for your daughter to understand that exercise isn't about punishing herself for the food she eats. So, I vote that everyone is an idiot here. Encouraging a child to eat junk food and binge-watch TV is a form of neglect. Of course, consuming junk food and watching television can be typical childhood activities, but this is not behavior that should be promoted. Physical activity and movement are vital components of a healthy kid. Unfortunately, your wife is setting your daughter up for lifelong health concerns. Update: am I an idiot for attempting to assist my daughter in losing weight? First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone for their support. I hope you all went for that walk. Regardless, we sent Amaya to her grandparents for 2 weeks. During that period, my wife and I were able to discuss our feelings openly. My wife informed me that as a child, she was overweight. She was nearly morbidly obese by the time she was a teenager, and her parents were furious about it. They pushed her to diet, kept her out of the house to compel her to exercise, instructed her PE teacher to have her do additional laps, and even locked away food so she couldn't consume it. She avoided discussing it, and I had no idea this had happened to her. She was in tears expressing concern that I might do the same to Amaya. I know my wife is overweight, but it has never worried me. I married her because I adore her. She is a beautiful wife and mother, but like all of us, she allowed her fears to get the best of her. That's why she freaked out when I started taking Amaya running with me. Anyway, following our discussion, we agreed that we could do it all as a family. I purchased bikes for us, downloaded family fitness DVDs, scheduled family lunchtimes, and went grocery shopping together. Now she joins us on our runs. Don't worry, Amaya and I will drop the pace to a jog so she can keep up. I wish she had revealed this sooner, but at the very least, it's now public knowledge. Many people praised my actions with Amaya, describing me as the ideal father. I am not flawless. I understand what it's like not to have a father. When I was 2, my father decided that he no longer wanted to be a father. He packed and left in the middle of the night, leaving only me and Mom. We have yet to hear from him again. He didn't call, write, or send child support. I have no idea where he is now, and I don't want to know. My mother worked 2 jobs to support us. We relocated 6 times, and it wasn't easy. I had several guys in my life who served as role models, but I did not have a father. I promised myself that if I ever became a father, it would be the father I wished I had. I recognize a lot of myself in Amaya. That's why I want her to know that I adore her unconditionally. That's why I adopted her. That's why I refer to her as my daughter rather than a stepdaughter. Here's a revised version of your passage. Amaya is my little child, and I want her to always feel loved and know that she can talk to me about anything. These days, children are already facing difficulties, and I want her to understand that if things get complicated, we can go for a walk and talk about it. I assumed this had to do with your wife's past. Her parents were nasty to her, and I believe that showing kindness and understanding would be beneficial for her. You keep doing what you do. It makes you an excellent father and husband. Great update. I understood your wife's reaction. Growing up, my mother wasn't as awful as your wife's parents, but my weight was discussed virtually every day. I was repeatedly encouraged to ride my bike and get out of the house as if there was something wrong with me. As I grew older, it was always the first thing my mother mentioned. Either I looked like I'd lost some weight or I needed to be cautious because I had gained. I just reminded myself to be sensitive and never come across in that manner. Your goals are terrific, and you're going about it wonderfully and kindly. Just be sure to always choose family time over workouts. You're wonderful. Thank you for being a good father. I am a 44-year-old female who has endured emotional and psychological abuse at the hands of a narcissistic father and had no protection from a weak, dependent mother. Hearing from dads like you makes me grieve for my inner child, the younger me. I was reflecting on how my parents' actions influenced my life. Dads are crucial to young girls and boys, and it appears that you are the type of father that many women do not have. Keep doing what you're doing as a father and spouse. You're doing fantastic. I'm a 42-year-old man engaged to a 33-year-old woman who is the right one. We've been dating for a little over 3 years, and I proposed last month. Last night, after another round of wedding preparations, my fiancé asked if I was okay with her becoming a stay-at-home wife. At first, I chuckled because I assumed she was joking, but she was serious. Finally, she implored me not to laugh and expressed her desire to be a stay-at-home wife. I asked her why, as we both make good money at our jobs, but we cannot afford our existing lifestyle on one income. She says it's because I earn a lot more, which is correct. I make almost 40% more than she does, so that we could cut back on our expenses. She's been on my mind a lot lately, and working 9 to 5 isn't for me. I asked if she was serious, and she affirmed that she was. I expressed my discomfort with the concept and suggested that if we have children, she could be a stay-at-home mom, but I'm not interested in her being a stay-at-home wife. She accused me of being manipulative because we don't have children, but I just mentioned it as a hypothetical because I'm not comfortable being the primary breadwinner. That escalated into a furious confrontation, with her claiming that I should support her dreams, even when I asked. She never specified what she intended to accomplish with her time at home, and this is where I might have been insensitive. In the heat of the moment, I asked, "Where is this coming from? Why is it your dream to be a stay-at-home wife? Is it your dream to be lazy?" She became enraged and went to her mother's house, saying, "We'll talk more when you calm down." Let me be honest, I don't want her to be a stay-at-home wife. I'm not comfortable with being the sole breadwinner, and I don't want to support this fantasy. I want a life companion, not a dependent who spends their days doing nothing productive. Am I the idiot? Being a stay-at-home mom is a job, presuming the mother does the childcare and does not delegate all of the labor to a staff of nannies and housekeepers. Being a stay-at-home wife with no PCORs for childcare is not comparable. If you both agree on something, that's one thing, but you've stated that you're searching for a partner, not a sugar baby. Not the imbecile, what you said may have been a little unkind. Just because she'll be home doesn't imply she wants to be lazy. However, I believe you were pretty close off base. You asked her what she would do in her spare time, and she did not seem to have an answer for you. She claims that's her dream, but she doesn't say what it is. Without defined goals for what she wants to do, your fears are more valid. You do not want to be the exclusive source of money, and that is entirely reasonable. It might be tough to support a family on your own, lol, encourage her dreams. If my spouse wanted to go back to college, would help him. If he wanted to establish his own business in an area that he was passionate about, I would assist him. If he had a fantasy of sitting on his buttocks and playing video games while being a stay-at-home husband, he would soon back my dream of divorce. Your values appear to be significantly different from those of your fiancé. You're not an idiot. She is being manipulative, bordering on gaslighting, by alleging that you were manipulative for not fully supporting her aspirations. What kind of partner does that? She was not born a trust fund baby or a member of the Corrided gentry, so I'm not sure where the assumption that she'll find someone to support her comes from. Was her mother a housewife or a working mother? Oh, and don't forget, she's gone to her mother's. I'm concerned she's not the right person for me, and our relationship may end. Thanks for watching. How did you find the story? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more awesome stories like this. Your feedback and support mean a lot.